Chapter 1976. Shun Luo, and didn't say anything. However, his eyes couldn't help but take a few more glances at her. What did the doctor say to you? Oh. Shin Manting continued eating. What else can I say? I'll probably say that my emotions are unstable or something like that. His expression was very calm, as if he was narrating something that was not a big deal. Auntie Lin couldn't help but ask. Shun Luo, and didn't seem very happy, but he was also restraining his temper. No one made a sound. After dinner, Shin Manting walked back to her room. She didn't even pick up the baby and lock the door. Who knew what she was doing inside? Aunt Lin held the baby in her arms and felt a little strange. She walked over to Shun Luo, and then sat down in front of him. She said, "Something doesn't seem right today." Shun Luo, and also felt that something was wrong. He glanced at the baby in Aunt Lin's arms and said, "Maybe he's in a bad mood. I'll go check on him later." Could he have run away? I think she's been acting strangely all day. Aunt Lin stared at the door of the room. In her mind, she imagined Shin Manting escaping through the window. Shun Luo, and thought it was nonsense. He smiled and looked at the baby. "Don't worry. She won't be able to bear to part with little Moon." Auntie Lin also looked at the baby. She nodded and said, "That's true. The baby hasn't been weaned yet. No mother would be willing to do that." However, Shin Manting stayed in there for a long time. The baby fell asleep and woke up crying. Auntie Lin touched it and found that it was defecation. "Sir, please bring me a diaper," he said. Then he whispered, "Go and check on Manting. Don't let her get sick from being cooped up in there alone." Shun Luo, and nodded and took out his keys with ease. However, the resistance of the door was great. There seemed to be something blocking it. He pushed it with all his might, but there was nothing inside. The wind whistled in through the window and made Shun Luo and shiver. Whoosh. Today the wind is very strong. The things in the room are blown from side to side. The quilt was messy and there was no light in the room. Shun Luo, and immediately felt that something was wrong. He was shocked and immediately turned on the lights. The light was turned on, illuminating everything in the room. However, the room was empty. The wardrobe was open and the windows were wide open. It was as if they were telling the whereabouts of Shin Manting. Aunt Lin had never expected that Shin Manting would abandon her child in order to leave. After being shocked, she looked at Shun Luo, and in a different light. She didn't believe it before, but now, could it be that they were really siblings? Shin Manting didn't go far. Firstly, he was reluctant to part with her. Secondly, if he were to leave now, it would be too obvious. Since he was going to leave, he would leave thoroughly. She didn't want to live like that anymore. The inhuman abuse, the lowly life of living under someone else's roof. Even though she lived alone, she could support herself. As for the child, since the Shin family wanted him, they would not mistreat him. Shin Manting lay in her room and closed her eyes. Unknowingly, he fell asleep. But not long after, he was woken up by the rising milk. She frowned and realized that her clothes were wet. She lifted them up and saw that they were red and swollen. It was hard like a rock. White liquid dripped down. It was a ghastly sight to behold, along with the red and swollen veins. Looking at the time, it was already morning. She had not fed the baby for an entire night. When he realized this, he suddenly felt a lump in his throat. Chapter 1977. It was rare for her to sleep so soundly, but when she woke up, she found that everything she had was gone. It was like a dream. Shin Manting got up and squeezed out the milk. She freshened up and turned on her cell phone in the room. Her cell phone had been turned off since last night. As soon as she turned it on, there were many missed calls and calls. She immediately turned off the signal and connected to the wireless network in the guest house. When she opened WeChat, there were many messages from Shun Luo on. Shun Luo, and, "Where are you?" Shun Luo, and, "The baby can't stop crying and has been looking for his mother. Where are you?" When she saw this, Shin Manting's tears, which she had tried so hard to stop, burst again. Her shoulders trembled and she cried bitterly. Shun Luo, and, voice message. As soon as she turned on the phone, she heard the baby crying. Aunt Lin's voice came from the other side. "Manting, the baby can't find his mother. His voice is hoarse from crying. How can you leave just like that?" Shun Luo, and, voice message. In a low and calm voice he said, "I know you hate me, but the baby is innocent. After all, you gave birth to him. Why did you leave him with me like this?" Shun Luo, Anne's voice was clear, but it still couldn't cover the baby's crying behind him. "Yes, the baby is innocent." Shin Manting was a little shaken. After all, she gave birth to the baby. Why did she give him the baby? What if Shun Luo and found a stepmother in the future? Would she abuse her child? But if she took the baby with her? She couldn't afford to raise him. What should she do? Shen Luo and frantically searched for her. He used his connections and found surveillance cameras. He tried everything he could think of. However, the police said that Shen Manting had no record of staying in any hotel or leaving the city. In the next few days, Shen Manting seemed to have disappeared. Shen Luo and couldn't stand it anymore and sent her a message. Aunt Lin has left. I can't take care of the baby alone. I want to take him back to the capital for his parents to take care of. After thinking about it, he felt that his tone might be too soft, so he added, no matter what, the baby needs to drink milk. He can't just drink milk powder. The nutrition won't keep up. I want to send the baby back. I will wait for you at home for 2 days. If you don't come, then this baby has nothing to do with you. Shen Manting looked at the message and was slightly lost. She had been staring at her phone the whole time. She could see clearly what Shen Luo and was typing. He was typing again. Shen Manting received a message that sent a chill down her spine. He said, I will tell the child that his mother is dead. However, Shen Manting didn't seem to have seen his message at all. She didn't appear at all. Shen Luo and couldn't take it anymore and sent the child back to the capital. Before the plane took off, Shen Luo and sent her one last message. You're so cruel. You're the one who didn't want him. It's useless even if you regret it in the future. When Shinjilia got home from work, his eyes widened when he saw the infant. This child is yours? Shen Luo and glanced at him and nodded. No way, where's Sister Manting? Dead. Shinjilia looked at him in disbelief. How did he die? Shen Luo and didn't reply. He carried the infant into the room. Shinjilia caught up with her and asked, didn't you go to take care of Sister Manting? How did you die? Are you lying to me? Shen Luo and didn't answer, but the baby started to cry. Chapter 1978. Why do you have so much to say? Shen Luo and looked at him with displeasure. Shinjilia was even more certain of his guess and said angrily, you're a beast. Shen Luo and didn't retort and focused on changing the baby's diaper. When Shinjilia saw that, he turned around and walked out in exasperation. After Shinjilia and Yi Qianqian got married, Yi Qianqian couldn't wait to post it on her moments. That night she received a lot of likes. She was elated. Look, so many people are giving us their blessings. Yi Qianqian sat on the bed wearing only a nightgown. So many people are asking me when we're holding our wedding. How should I reply? Truthfully. Shinjilia took off his shoes and climbed into bed. It's so cold, he said. It's not cold. Yi Qianqian glanced at him. Are you feeling weak? Me? Wait. Shinjilia raised his eyebrows slightly and pounced on her. A man has to pay for saying that. Don't move. Yi Qianqian lay down. And Flo's here. Don't even think about touching me. Shinjilia was instantly defeated. He looked at her and sighed. Aunt Flo. Why is there such a thing as Aunt Flo? The arrival of her relatives meant that she wasn't pregnant. That wasn't good news for Shinjilia. When Yi Qianqian saw that, she threw her phone aside and hugged him. Because I'm a woman. Humph. Shinjilia lay down and hugged her. You're my woman from now on. Honey, go to sleep. Yes, hubby. Yi Qianqian smiled, but she didn't go to sleep immediately. Instead, she picked up her phone and continued to reply to her moments. Shinjilia's heart warmed when he saw her soft and happy face. He gently reached out and stroked the ends of her hair. Grandma came to talk to me today, he said. Huh? What did she say? Yi Qianqian asked without looking up. Since we're already married, Grandma hopes that you can stop your work in Kingstown and come live in the capital. Yi Qianqian paused and looked up at him. Shinjilia looked a little conflicted as he said, you know how old people think. They're very conservative. Besides, I feel that since I'm working in the capital, there's no reason for us to move to a different place even after we're married. We've been in a different place for so long. We can't possibly get married again, can we? Yi Qianqian turned off the screen and looked at Shinjilia. Aren't we not officially married yet? Yi Qianqian looked at Shinjilia. Let's wait until after the wedding. I think, isn't it a little too sudden now? Recently I've been on the rise. I might be promoted to the position of chief editor. She had been working in that position for a few years. In fact, a promotion was not necessary. She had never been obsessed with a promotion or anything like that. But it was the most practical recognition of her work. Once he was promoted, he would tell his father about it, and his father would definitely be very pleased. This was a crucial period. Resign. Yi Qianqian was indignant. Shinjilia understood. He gently stroked the back of her head and nodded. Yeah, okay. She looked at Shinjilia in front of her. Although he hadn't said anything, Yi Qianshan felt an inexplicable sense of grievance. Since she was married, she had to move in with her in-laws. Since she was married, did that mean that she had to give up her job and everything she had worked so hard for? Chapter 1979. However, this was the path she had chosen. It seemed to be too late to regret now. He took a deep breath and said, "What Grandma means is that you're under too much pressure at work. I know about your current job. When you're busy, you have to work overtime for several weeks. You don't even have a break on Saturdays and Sundays. How tiring is that?" Yi Qianshan was speechless. "But I've been doing this for so many years." Yi Qianshan whispered, "I'm used to it. It makes me feel terrible to quit just like that." Shinjilia held her close. "You have to be picky about your body. It must have something to do with the stress of work. Otherwise, why haven't you gotten pregnant after so long? Why don't you say that you might be the reason?" Yi Qianshan pushed him away. "Aren't you also as busy as a dog at work? You have to work overtime every day to take care of patients. Why are you blaming me? Maybe you've worked overtime too." Shinjilia smiled. He hugged her and whispered in her ear, "Don't think that I don't know that your period is a mess. I've known you for a long time, and you're still saying that it's not because of work?" Yi Qianshan was clearly unconvinced. "I'm not very accurate in the first place. All the more reason for you to recuperate." Shinjilia held her down. "Listen to me. Rest for a while and then we'll go on a honeymoon, okay?" "Honeymoon?" Yi Qianshan's eyes began to sparkle as she asked, "Where are we going? Where do you want to go?" "Of course I have to go somewhere romantic." Yi Qianshan thought for a moment. She lowered her head and picked up her phone. "Let me do a search." "There's no need for that." Shinjilia took the phone from her hand. "How about Phuket?" "Phuket, Thailand?" "Yes. Sure." Yi Qianshan wasn't picky. "It's been a long time since I've seen the sea. The weather there seems pretty good." "That's pretty good." Shinjilia couldn't help but kiss her on the lips. "I'll wait for you. I've already spoken to the hospital. You can come anytime." "Your family owns the hospital?" Yi Qianshan clicked her tongue and shook her head. "Why is it that every time you take leave from work, you act as if nothing has happened? Aren't you being too arrogant?" "My father is a good friend of the hospital director." Shinjilia appeared a little embarrassed and coughed lightly. "Isn't my brother involved in medical research? He's been working with the hospital director for quite some time." "Oh." Yi Qianshan understood. "So it's because of connections." When Shinjilia heard that, he snorted and said, "I'm capable, all right? Otherwise, why do you think the dean wanted me to go back? I've always been comfortable in Kingstown." "Hey, so it was the director who asked you to go back?" Yi Qianshan seemed very surprised. "Still pretending? See how I'll deal with you." "Ah, don't scratch me, it's itchy, haha." The 5th day of the 3rd month was a great day. The weather was fine and sunny, and the wind was gentle and the sun bright. The imperial capital had been frozen for more than half a year. Today was the most comfortable day ever since the warming stopped. Everyone in the Shun family was busy receiving guests and preparing for the wedding. Because old Mrs. Shun was more traditional, Yi Qianshan didn't even order a wedding dress. She just wore the phoenix coronet and wedding gown that old Mrs. Shun had custom-made long ago and waited in the room. In the past, Yi Qianshan had always thought that a Chinese-style wedding was beautiful. But when she changed into the gown, she felt like she was about to collapse. Chapter 1980. "Wow, you look so good." The makeup artist who was helping Yi Qianshan with her makeup was all smiles. After fixing her phoenix coronet, she began to work on Yi Qianshan's long red gown. Layer after layer, from the underwear to the underwear to the outerwear, she was wrapped in layers. It was extremely troublesome. Yi Qianshan had a naughty thought. Would Shinjilia break down when he undressed her tonight? Or should I just leave it at that? Since I won't be wearing it in the future, I'll just tear it off? The makeup artist glanced at the strange smile on her face and said, "What are you thinking about? A bride should pay attention to her image." Ahem. Yi Qianshan blushed. Soon the makeup artist was done. She stood in the distance and exclaimed, "You look so good. You're so beautiful. Come, let me take a picture." She picked up her phone and snapped a few pictures. She sent a copy to Yi Qianshan and immediately shared it on her WeChat Moments. Many people from the bridesmaids and sisters came. There were colleagues, sisters, and classmates. There was also the artist whom she was on good terms with. The makeup artist led Yi Qianshan to the bridal room. The group of people inside burst into an uproar. "You look so good. I thought the dress that the old lady chose for you would be old-fashioned. I didn't expect it to be so beautiful." It's stunning. But is your hair made of gold? Is it heavy? When the last question was asked, the people around her laughed at her misfortune. Yi Qianshan's neck was sore. When she heard that, she gritted her teeth and said, "Shut up." Because the two residences were too far apart, Yi Qianshan was in another house. Yi Zhenhua was inside. When he heard the commotion, he walked in and asked with a smile, "What's the matter?" As soon as he entered, he saw Yi Qianshan's appearance. His eyes were filled with amazement. He walked over and said, "Qianshan? I almost couldn't recognize you." Yi Qianshan pouted and said, "I've always been pretty. How could I not recognize you?" Yi Yu was beside her. When she heard that, she nudged her and said, "Come on. Just a compliment and you're acting all high and mighty?" "That's right. Don't you have any shame?" Seeing that you're getting married today, I won't argue with you. I'll let you be happy for one day." Yi Qianshan pretended not to hear or see anything and sat quietly on the bed. "Come on, put on your jewelry." Fang Tong Tong brought over a tray filled with glittering gold ornaments. Wow. The crowd was in an uproar. Tycoon, tycoon. This is too scary. 2, 4, 6, 8, 18 golden bracelets. Oh. When Yi Qianshan saw it, she felt goosebumps all over her body. "Don't tell me I have to wear every single one of them?" "Of course," Yi Zhenhua said matter-of-factly. "How could I not wear it? Why would I buy it? Come on, put it on her." The crowd was filled with gloating gazes. Apart from that, there was also some envy. Yi Qianshan wanted to cry, but no tears came out. She resigned herself to her fate as one bracelet after another was put on her. Apart from the bracelets, there were also a few strange-looking gold necklaces hanging around his neck. What? Why don't people wear so many things when they get married? Yi Qianshan was on the verge of breaking down. "It's so heavy." "Go away, go away, go away." Yi Zhenhua's face was full of reproach. "We're getting married. What are you talking about? Don't jinx it." Yi Qianshan blinked and looked aggrieved. "It's so heavy." Chapter 1981. "That means you're important," Yi Zhenhua said with a gratified expression. "Only when you're important will others cherish you. It's a good omen." Other Western-style weddings didn't need to be so complicated. Yi Qianshan grumbled in her heart, but she didn't say a word. Not long after, someone came forward and said, "The groom is here, everyone get ready." Yi Qianshan was about to faint from the pressure. When she heard that, she immediately thought, "I'm going to be liberated." However, she was obviously too naive. Shinjilia was blocked outside the door. It was noisy and Yi Qianshan's mind was blank. He knelt down on one knee and looked at her as he said, "Qianshan, I'll take you home." The crowd jeered again. Yi Qianshan was a little confused. Numbly he was brought to the car and then performed the wedding ceremony. He thought that since it was a new era, there wouldn't be so many twists and turns. However, she was wrong. He was so wrong. Not only did they bow to the heaven and earth, but they also crossed the brazier. When Yi Qianshan stepped over, she felt her crotch warm. It almost burned. Then he saw the Shin family. Yi Qianshan's head was covered with a veil, and she was led along the way. An old voice sang the vows and finally the ceremony of marriage. First bow to heaven and earth. Second bow to your parents. Bow to each other. Yi Qianshan felt as if she were in a television drama, but that was the truth. She felt like she had experienced a wedding that only existed during the Qing dynasty. This feeling was really inhuman. Yi Qianshan's jewelry alone weighed at least a dozen kilograms. It looked respectable, but behind this respectable, the one suffering was the bride. Some of the elders said something, but Yi Qianshan couldn't hear it clearly. But in the end, the old voice asked, "Do you remember?" When Yi Qianshan heard Shinjilia speak up, she quickly replied, "I'll remember it." Someone seemed to be laughing beside her. Soon, the old lady who had asked the question walked over and held Yi Qianshan's hand. She said, "You're a good child. You must listen to your grandmother and be filial to your parents-in-law in the future. Do you understand?" There was a faint fragrance on the old man's body. It was very familiar. Yi Qianshan thought for a moment before she remembered. This seemed to be the smell of that old Madame Dongfang. She was a good friend of old Mrs. Shen. "Yeah, thank you, Grandma Dongfang," Yi Qianshan replied. When old Madame Dongfang heard this, she smiled in satisfaction and said, "What a clever child." As soon as he finished speaking, he shouted, "Send her to the bridal chamber." When the joyous music started playing, Yi Qianshan felt like she was dreaming. Later, she found out that old Madame Dongfang's ancestors were all members of the royal family. In terms of bloodline, she was a legitimate descendant of Gij. Deep in their bones and thoughts, they were all proper traditions. After the decline of the Qing dynasty, this ideological tradition was preserved. Old Mrs. Shen had always been on good terms with her, so she had given her full authority to host this important wedding. It was decent, but Yi Qianshan didn't feel good about it. When she was sent back to her room, Yi Qianshan felt as if her neck was about to snap. Just as he was about to lift the veil, an old hand stopped him. Yi Qianshan was shocked. She had always thought that it was her friend who helped her in. She didn't expect it to be an old man. Who was it? Chapter 1982. As for the repeated chapters, it's because of the previous crackdown on pornography. I've edited the previous chapters and released them again. This will show that it's been updated, but in reality, it's just replacing the previous chapters. It's free to click on the chapters that everyone has already read. Chapter 1983. Yi Qianshan's heart raced. Her arms stiffened and her body stiffened. Oh, who are you? Yi Qianshan was certain that this wasn't Grandma Dongfang or Shenjilia's grandmother. The old woman smiled and replied, I'm your Grandma Cheng. It's okay if you don't know me. I'll get your grandmother to introduce me to you tomorrow. Yi Qianshan breathed a sigh of relief. She was about to nod her head, but the weight on her neck made her give up on the idea. All right. Thank you, Grandma Cheng. Why isn't your husband here yet? He must be exhausted. Grandma Cheng's voice was warm, but there was a hint of heartache in it. Yi Qianshan felt wronged, but her rationality made her stronger. She replied, It's just a little heavy. Everything else is fine. Grandma Cheng laughed and said, In the past it was always like this when people got married. We even saved a lot of steps. In the past we had to wake up before 4 o'clock. The number of times we combed our hair, the amount of makeup we applied, the jewelry we wore, and the style we wore were all very particular. We even had to whisper to our mother at the bedside and cry our wedding. These things were all very particular in the past, but in today's society, there's a lot more freedom. Yi Qianshan clicked her tongue when she heard that and asked, Did Grandma Cheng have a Chinese-style wedding when she got married in the past? We didn't have that kind of style back then. We had just been liberated and we were poor everywhere. We didn't have the money to hold such a wedding. As soon as Grandma Cheng finished speaking, the sound of the door opening came from the other side. Familiar footsteps sounded, and Yi Qianshan immediately felt the urge to cry. It's here, it's finally here. Shenjulia's face was flushed. He had just been forced to drink a lot of wine. When he walked in he felt like he was floating. When he saw Grandma Cheng he greeted, Hello Grandma. Yeah good. Grandma Cheng patted him on the shoulder and said, Your wife has been waiting anxiously. Hurry up and go. Shenjulia chuckled and said, Thank you Grandma. Grandma Cheng took his hand and said, Come lift your wife's veil. With my hands? Of course not. Grandma Cheng took a stick from the side and said, Here. Shenjulia looked at it and reached out to lift the stick. The red veil was lifted. Yi Qianshan wasn't sure if it was real or not. She only felt that her neck was much more relaxed. She looked up at Shenjulia with an aggrieved expression and said, Hubby, my neck hurts. Hubby. Those two words tickled Shenjulia's heart. He stepped forward and removed the golden phoenix coronet from her head. Yi Qianshan finally felt liberated. She stretched her neck and almost screamed in pleasure. When Grandma Cheng saw this she walked out and closed the door. Yi Qianshan glanced behind her. Before she could see if Grandma Cheng had left, Shenjulia stood in front of her. Shenjulia's beautiful, clear amber eyes were filled with astonishment. He held Yi Qianshan's hand with both hands and whispered, You look so beautiful today. When Yi Qianshan heard that, the corners of her lips unconsciously curled up. She was a little smug but also a little indignant. She asked, Am I not usually pretty? You look the prettiest today. Shenjulia reached out and helped her remove the necklace from her neck. The man weighed it in his hand and secretly exclaimed, It's really heavy. You only wore it for a day? Weibo, Uncle Wan Lily. Chapter 1984. At the mention of that, Yi Qianshan felt even more aggrieved. She said, Yeah. You have no idea how uncomfortable it was for me to be piled up with this pile of gold. It's so heavy. He wanted to say that it was too heavy. But then she remembered that today was a joyous day and she couldn't just die like that. The words that were about to come out of her mouth immediately changed and she said in a sweet voice, I've been reborn. Shenjulia didn't know how to react for a moment. Then he burst out laughing. Yi Qianshan reached out and poked his chest. You're still laughing. It's not easy to marry you. Look at my sister. She has so many things to deal with. Shinjilia held her hand and his breathing quickened. However, his other hand was not idle. He untied the rings of the necklace around her neck. There were a total of 3 necklaces, one thicker than the other. Next were all kinds of bracelets, and bracelets. Shinjilia removed them one by one and placed them on the bedside table. There were more than 10 or 20 of them. Shinjilia felt sorry for her, but at the same time he found it funny. Finally, after putting everything away, he said, "Thank you for your hard work." All the weight on Yi Chanshan's body was lifted. She lay down on the bed and said, "I'm so tired." "Yeah." Shinjilia leaned forward and unbuttoned her dress. "Just this once. When we get to Yun Town, we'll wear a wedding dress. I'm not walking anymore. I'm so tired." Yi Chanshan allowed him to do whatever he wanted. Suddenly, she recalled the idea she had that morning. She smiled and said, "Hubby, guess how many clothes I'm wearing?" "I can't guess," Shinjilia said as he unbuttoned her shirt. "Let's try it on and you'll know." That was exactly what Yi Chanshan was thinking. She ignored him and narrowed her eyes. But after a while he fell asleep in a daze. As she fell asleep, she felt as if she was about to fly. Then she felt a chill run down her spine. His face and neck felt itchy and warm at the same time. She tilted her head, but her lips were firmly captured by his. When she opened her eyes, Shinjilia's face was right in front of hers. He smiled softly and said in a low voice, "8." Before she could react, he suddenly lifted her leg. His clothes were still intact. Yi Chanshan perked up and asked, "What are you doing?" "Wedding night." Shinjilia's cheeks were still a little red, and he looked at her with a smile. "What do you think I want to do?" "Oh." Yi Chanshan covered her face. "You just kissed my face. I have makeup on." "Don't." When Shinjilia heard that, he quickly put her down and said, "Come on, remove your makeup before you sleep." "I'm so sleepy, help me." "Why are you so lazy?" Shinjilia pinched her nose and walked over to the vanity. "Which one is for removing makeup?" Shinjilia rummaged through the dressing table. Yi Chanshan got up on her own and pulled on an inner garment. All the other clothes on her body had been stripped off, and she was only wearing this one, revealing half of her body. Shinjilia's eyes burned with passion. Yi Chanshan didn't realize it at all. After removing her makeup, she went to the bathroom to wash her face. But halfway through, with bubbles still on her face, the man hugged her from behind. "Let me help you." Shinjilia scooped up some water and wiped it on her face. Not only did he not wash her face clean, but he also wet her clothes. Yi Chanshan was annoyed. She turned around and was about to say something, but her lips were pressed against his. Chapter 1985. Yi Chanshan struggled a little, but there was no doubt that it was of no use at all. Therefore, a certain someone pounced on her without hesitation. Well, after all, the atmosphere of the wedding night was exactly what they wanted. Yi Chanshan thought about it and let him do as he pleased. However, the price she paid was a little heavy. After a carefree night, Yi Chanshan's body, which was about to fall apart from exhaustion, was tormented even more. The next day, Yi Chanshan didn't even want to open her eyes. However, Shinjilia still woke her up and said, "Wake up. Grandma and Mom and Dad are waiting for us to serve them tea." Yi Chanshan felt uncomfortable all over. She whimpered and didn't want to move at all. Shinjilia tugged at her. Yi Chanshan reached out and patted his body lazily. She was weak. "Come, I'll help you brush your teeth. I'll sleep a little longer." 10 minutes. Yi Chanshan closed her eyes and lay on the pillow, pulling the blanket over her head. Shinjilia, who was standing by the side, asked, "What if Grandma gets mad later?" Yi Chanshan was speechless. "Wife." Yi Chanshan was speechless. "Hey Grandma, why are you here?" When she heard that, Yi Chanshan immediately covered her body and looked up. But where was Grandma? Shinjilia saw that and chuckled. He pulled her up and said, "All right, come back and continue sleeping after the tea." Yi Chanshan still felt weak when she heard that. She looked at the time. It was only 6 o'clock. She raised her hand lazily and said, Carry me." Shinjilia carried her to the bathroom and squeezed some toothpaste for her. Yi Chanshan chased him out and locked the door from the inside before slowly locking it. After taking a shower, he walked out of the bathroom. When she came out, she found that her face looked as if it had been squeezed dry. Yi Chanshan put on a towel and walked out. Her body was still sore. Shinjilia was lying on the bed and almost fell asleep. When he saw her walking over, he immediately got up and rummaged through her clothes. He found a red cheongsam. The cheongsam was very exquisite. It was a spring dress. After putting it on Yi Chanshan, it looked delicate and exquisite. Shinjilia couldn't help but plant a kiss on her lips. My wife is so beautiful. Yi Qianshan pouted and said, let's go. Comb your hair and blow dry it. Xinjilia had no choice but to take a towel to dry her hair. You look terrible. Let's wait until you look better before we go out. Okay. Yi Qianshan let him play with her and almost fell asleep again. Her body was aching. When the sound of the hairdryer stopped, she immediately straightened up. After applying a little makeup cream on her face, her complexion finally looked better. Outside, Nanny he had already prepared the tea. When he saw them coming out, he brought the tray over. Yi Qianshan had never eaten pork before, but she had at least seen a pig run. She carried the tray over and knelt down with Xinjilia. She raised the tray over her head and said, Grandma, please have some tea. Old Mrs. Shun was all smiles. It was rare for her to be in such a good mood. Nodding her head in satisfaction, she took the tea and took a sip. She said, My good granddaughter-in-law, get up. Grandma will give you a big red packet. Xinjilia didn't expect Yi Qianshan to be so perceptive. The corners of his mouth turned up. He was in a wonderful mood. Shen Longyue and Mrs. Shen did the same. After the tea was served, the whole family naturally had breakfast together. Now that the new wife was married, she naturally had to go out to meet the guests. Just as old Mrs. Shen was about to lead Yi Qianshan out, Yi Qianshan was stunned. More than 2 million words had been written. Thank you for your persistence. We're going to do a small event. We're going to pick 10 people from Zhangping to give 888 book coins. Heart. The new book, 99 Days of Hidden Marriage, Chief Please Be Reserved, is already fat. Chapter 1986. She hugged the door tightly and looked at Xinjilia for help. Hubby, didn't you say? Xinjilia didn't expect things to turn out this way. He cleared his throat and said, Well, she should be back soon, right? When Xinjilia said this, he felt guilty. She glanced at old Mrs. Shen with a questioning look. Old Mrs. Shen glanced at it and said, We still have to go to Dongfang for lunch. We'll be back in the afternoon. Yi Qianshan felt like she was about to faint. She was really sleepy. Xinjilia's heart ached for her and he said, Grandma, why don't we do it another day? Qianshan must be exhausted from the past few days. How can that be? I've already told my old sisters that it can't be changed. Old Mrs. Shen looked displeased and said, Who told you not to worry about your wife? It's fine, Qianshan. We'll be back in the afternoon. Oh, be a good girl and follow Grandma. Yi Qianshan felt that she was about to be abducted and sold. When she saw how happy her grandmother was, she compromised and said, All right. Let's go. Old Mrs. Shen immediately beamed. He grabbed Yi Qianshan's hand and quickly left. After the ordeal, Yi Qianshan felt as if she had seen a ghost. She felt much better. After dinner, she returned home. Xinjilia wasn't home. Shenluo and was sitting on the sofa with the baby in his arms, coaxing him. It was rare for Yi Qianshan to see such a young child. She went forward and called out, Big brother, is the baby asleep? Shenluo and didn't raise his head. He replied in a low voice, No. Do you want a hug? All Yi Qianshan wanted to do was hug the baby and bask in the happy atmosphere. When she heard that, she reached out her hands. Shenluo and didn't look up. He reached out and handed the baby to her. She didn't know why, even though she hadn't seen his face, she felt that this man seemed a little sad. He couldn't help but take a few more glances. However, Shenluo and seemed to be prepared. He quickly got up and turned to leave. Yi Qianshan watched his back as he entered the public bathroom. Soon she heard the sound of the door closing. Her voice wasn't loud, but at that moment Yi Qianshan's heart felt empty. The baby was very obedient. At that moment he was looking at Yi Qianshan with a pair of round eyes. He opened his mouth slightly and stuck out his tongue. Yi Qianshan couldn't help but smile. She hugged him and sat down. Nanny he had just returned from watering the plants. When she saw Yi Qianshan carrying the baby, she couldn't help but ask, Where's Master? Where's the bathroom? Oh. Nanny he put down the watering can and wiped her hands on her apron. She walked up to her and said, Second young mistress, eldest young master doesn't look very happy. I think he misses his mother. If you have nothing better to do, try to comfort him. The child's mother was Shin Manting. Was Shin Manting really dead? Yi Qianshan couldn't believe it. But if Shin Manting wasn't dead, where was she? While he was deep in thought, he heard the bathroom door open. Shenluo and seemed to have just washed his face. He walked over and said, Give it to me. Go rest for a while. Look at your face. Yi Qianshan subconsciously touched her face and looked into his eyes. Shenluo and quickly looked away and said, Jilia went out with Luo Ran. He asked you to rest when you came back. You don't have to look for him. Chapter 1987. Shenluo, and responded in a low voice and carried the child back to his room. Yi Qianqian returned to her room. She had thought that she would lie down and immediately fall asleep. But unexpectedly she was very energetic. Her mind was full of thoughts, and her mind was full of Shen Manting and Shenluo. Shen Jielia said that she was dead, but Shenluo looked sad sometimes, but he didn't mourn the death of his wife. Although it was a little wicked to think that way, no matter how she looked at it, it was impossible for Shen Manting to die. After thinking about it again and again, she picked up her phone. Of course, she couldn't have Shen Manting's WeChat. But there was someone who definitely had it. Sisai, Yu, are you there? Yu seemed to be very free and immediately replied, yes. Sisai, do you have Shen Manting's WeChat? No. With our previous relationship, do you think we would have each other's WeChat? When Yi Qianqian saw this, she actually felt that it was very reasonable. Sisai, do you know who has it? Shen Jielia, Shenluo, and your parents-in-law. Yi Qianqian straightened up and immediately called Shen Jielia. Shen Jielia was bragging to a group of friends, showing off the wedding ring and the superiority of a groom. At that moment, when he saw that his wife was calling, he proudly picked up the phone, waved it, and said, "Hey, my wife is calling. She's so clingy. I can't help it." The group of guys immediately sighed and waved their hands disdainfully. Shen Jielia helplessly shook his head and sighed. You are all jealous of me. Don't you know that jealousy makes people ugly? You guys are very ugly. Then he immediately picked up the phone and said, "Honey, what's wrong? Do you have Shen Manting's WeChat?" Yi Qianqian went straight to the point. When Shen Jielia heard that, he was silent for a moment before saying, "Why did you suddenly think of her? You told Big Brother that she was dead, but from his reaction, it doesn't seem like Shen Manting is dead. I want to try looking for her." Shen Jielia frowned and asked, "Honey, what are you trying to do?" "I think Big Brother has been in a bad mood recently. He's in a daze every day and looks very sad. Moreover, the baby needs his mother. If Shen Manting is not dead, let's find her and bring her back. The baby needs a complete family." "That's right," Shen Manting said. Shen Jielia's expression darkened. After some thought he said, "All right, I'll take a look." Then he hung up the phone and scrolled through his WeChat contact list. Luo ran and the others looked over and asked, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing. I have something to do. I'll be leaving first. You guys enjoy yourselves." "Io?" his buddies jeered. "So different after getting married. One phone call from your wife and you have to rush back. Poor single dogs like us." Shen Jielia was even more pleased with himself and said, "Just you wait, you ugly fellows." As he spoke, he had already picked up his car keys and walked out. He scrolled through and confirmed that Shen Manting's WeChat contact was indeed there. However, when he tried to send a message, the other party rejected it. Clearly he had been blacklisted. He opened his WeChat moments, but it was also blank. When he got home, Shen Jielia went into his room. Chapter 1988. What a heartless woman. However, Yi Qianqian's words reminded him of something. Shenluo had always referred to Shen Manting as dead. However, it didn't make sense that he didn't even mention a word about her funeral. Well, he had been negligent. He had been busy with the wedding and hadn't paid attention to this kind of thing. Now that he thought about it carefully, he found that there were loopholes everywhere. He picked up Yi Qianqian's phone and searched for Shen Manting's WeChat number. He soon found it. Nickname, Mopey, Loving Heart. He sent a friend request, but there was no response for a long time. Would Shen Manting be looking for a job at this time? After all, people had to eat. After thinking about it, Shen Jielia sent another friend request. "Hello, I saw your resume on the internet." However, he couldn't type any more words. He sent it over, but there was still no response. He wasn't surprised, but he was still a little disappointed. Shen Jielia put the phone back. He was also exhausted. He went to the bathroom to wash up and went to bed with her. However, when he was about to fall asleep, he heard Yi Qianqian's phone ring. He suddenly got up and took her phone. He unlocked it, but found it was only a Weibo gossip notification. He was disappointed again. Suddenly there was a soft sound. On the top of the notification bar, the big words were clear. "Mopey accepted your friend request." Shen Jielia was shocked and immediately opened it. However, before he could send anything, it showed that the other party was typing. "Mopey Heart. Hello, I'm Shen Manting. May I know which company you are from?" Oh my god. Shen Jielia didn't know how to react for a moment. It turned out to be, really Shen Manting? Sitting on the bed, Shen Jielia had a strong urge to shake Yi Qianqian awake. However, his reason prevailed over his impulse. Shenjilia especially clicked on Yi Chanshan's WeChat moments to take a look. The latest post was of her taking a picture of the wedding scene with a crying emoji. Getting married is so tiring. I'm going to draw a manga in the future. The name will be, What's the Experience of Marrying into a Traditional Family? It'll definitely be popular. Fire? Shenjilia was shocked when he saw it. As expected, this post was blocked from many people. This guy, Shenjilia smiled and scrolled down. There didn't seem to be any information that exposed her husband or family. Heaving a sigh of relief, he set his WeChat moments to display only 3 days, then replied, Hello, I'm an editor of the Eurasian Comics Imperial Capital Branch. I'm in charge of recruitment. After looking at your resume, I feel that you're very suitable for our job requirements. Shen Manting, who was far away in Jiangnan, was shocked to hear such a rigid reply. Eurasian Comics? This was Ming's company. Yu Lily used to work there and she often dropped by. However, a branch company in the Imperial Capital? A branch office in the Imperial Capital? Subconsciously he glanced at his profile picture. It was blank, followed by a chinchilla's butt. He clicked on this person's WeChat moments. He seemed to have gotten married recently. The other posts were all about work and promoting the comic. It should be true. Shen Manting confirmed it and asked, Are you from the capital? Which website did you see it on? Just as he was at his wit's end, Yi Chanshan opened her eyes. Chapter 1989. Shenjilia's eyes immediately lit up when he saw Yi Chanshan. He said, My dear wife, you're here just in time. You're here to save the day. Reply to Sister Manting. Sister Manting? Yi Chanshan immediately perked up. Shen Manting? Yeah. Shenjilia nodded. I can't reveal my identity. If I do, she might blacklist us. So, I pretended to be from Eurasian Comics. What do you mean by pretending? Yi Chanshan took the phone. I'm from Eurasian Comics. Yi Chanshan looked at the chat history and replied, I saw your email in my mailbox. Didn't you send it yourself? Mopey Heart? Well, I sent it in one go. I didn't check the company. Sisai? Oh, Sisai. Miss Shin, have you never worked before? Mopey Heart? Yes, but I've never been in the field of comics. Sisai? You don't need to have any experience in comics. We're mainly looking for talents in the marketing department. You must be able to work hard. Your resume looks good. If you're interested, you're welcome to come for an interview. Mopey Heart? I'm not in the capital. Does that mean you're not coming back? Yi Chanshan was a little surprised. She was about to reply when Shenjilia stopped her. What are you trying to say? Shenjilia asked. Ask her to come back. Yi Chanshan said matter-of-factly. Come to the capital. Why do you want to? If you insist, people will think you're a multi-level marketer with bad intentions. I'll do it. As he spoke, Shenjilia had already taken the phone from her. Sisai, it's okay. Think about it. Yi Chanshan panicked when she saw that and said, If you say that, people will come back. I didn't want to come back. If she doesn't come back later, it's all your fault. What's the rush? Mopey Heart? Okay, thank you. Sisai, 5 days off and 2 days off. The base salary is 5,000 and there will be a commission. The marketing department has a hard time. You may have to work overtime. The overtime pay is $20 an hour. Yi Chanshan was stunned. For a newcomer, isn't this too much? No. Shenjilia's expression was natural. She must have found quite a number of jobs. The salary isn't low, but it's not excessive either. Mopey Heart? Okay, thank you. Sisai? There's a staff dormitory and a 3-month trial period. After that, you'll be able to purchase 5 insurances and 1 housing fund. The benefits are quite good and you'll be able to enjoy all kinds of holidays. If you want to come, you can come and see. Where are you now? Mopey, love, Jiangsu. Sisai, alright. I hope you can consider it. We are eager for talents to join us. Shake hands. Hey, what a straight and official tone. One look and you can tell that it's a man speaking, Yi Chanshan said with a look of disdain. I'm a man to begin with. Besides, isn't that what recruitment is all about? It's fast and accurate. Shenjilia looked at her. The conditions are tempting. It's just a matter of whether she's willing to come. Yi Chanshan had a bad feeling about this. Why didn't you tell the truth? Why would we lie to her? I think that even if we trick her here, she will definitely hate us when she finds out that it's not true. Chapter 1990. Then you're still lying. Yi Chanshan felt indignant. It's different now that we're in a different company. Yeah. Shenjilia hugged his wife. That's true, but I think there must be some misunderstanding between her and my brother. Look at how depressed Big Brother has been recently. He's been taking care of the child and doesn't even go to the lab much. Yi Qianqian could tell. But was it really appropriate to lie to Shin Manting like that? She might even think that we're working together to lie to her. Wouldn't Big Brother be in an even more awkward situation then? Shinjilia actually felt that Yi Qianqian's words made sense. But the net had already been cast. Could it be retracted? It was too late. Now it all depended on whether Shin Manting would agree. Shinjilia was sleepy. He closed his eyes and fell asleep with his wife in his arms. However, Yi Qianqian felt much better after waking up. She took out her phone and scrolled through Weibo. Recently, a certain positive male star with a particularly good image had suddenly been exposed by a woman. It was suspected that the male star had cheated her of her money and feelings. She scrolled through the comments. The comments were all questioning the male star's belief in his ex-girlfriend's words. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but sigh. Just as she was feeling emotional, she suddenly received a message. "Hello, I'll be in the capital in a few days." Wasn't the sender Shin Manting? Yi Qianqian was overjoyed. She immediately shook Shinjilia and shouted, "Hubby, look!" Shin Manting replied. Shinjilia had always been a light sleeper. He had already woken up when she suddenly got excited. When he heard this, he replied, "What did she say?" "She said she'll be in the capital in a few days." Shin Manting actually arrived in the capital the next day. She found a cheap guest house online. She laid out her own bed sheets and used her own toiletries. 100 yuan a day was considered very cheap in the imperial capital. Although the neighborhood was a little old, it was quite safe. She hadn't settled down for a long time. She carried her luggage and did some odd jobs. She quietly became a backpacker and wandered around the Jiangnan area. As for her resume, she received it every day. She also received phone calls and WeChat messages every day. However, it was either the salary was too low or the position was not ideal. Now, the reason why she decided to come to the capital was not only because of the generous treatment offered by the contact person, but also because she wanted to see her child. He didn't stay long. Just come quietly and leave quietly. After she was done, she changed into a fresh set of clothes and took the subway to a place near the Shin residence. This was a relatively leisurely residential area. There were also many office buildings, so there were quite a lot of people coming and going. Shin Manting disguised herself and sat on a bench in the park with her phone in her hand. She wanted to send a message to Shin Luo, but she felt that it was inappropriate. She didn't want to be with Shin Luo, and so she gave up on the child. However, blood was thicker than water. That kinship was not something she could give up just because she wanted to. During this period of time, all she could think about was Little Moon. Even in her dreams, she missed him. However, he couldn't bring himself to do so. Shin Manting hesitated for a long time before she switched off the screen. However, the phone vibrated slightly. Shin Manting picked up the phone and took a closer look. It was Shin Luo. Shin Luo, it's you? Shin Manting was stunned, and then she was shocked again. Chapter 1991. Shin Manting's heart raced when she saw the words that popped up on her phone. Almost reflexively, he looked around. Soon she saw a figure coming up from behind. The figure was tall but much thinner than the last time she saw him. He had lost weight. He was obviously thinner. Shin Manting's heart ached slightly, but she reacted quickly and immediately got up. She subconsciously wanted to leave. However, Shin Luo quickly stepped forward and chased after her. Shin Manting ran faster when she heard the movement behind her, but there was still a huge gap in strength. Shin Luo caught up with her in a short while and grabbed her hand. Shin Manting was shocked and immediately flung her hand away as if she had been electrocuted. However, her hand was held tightly and didn't move at all. "Why are you here?" Shin Luo looked at her and frowned. "I told you it's useless for you to regret it. Why did you come here and leave as soon as you saw me?" What could she do? Shin Manting looked at Shin Luo and then opened her mouth. She wanted to speak, but she didn't know what to say. She wanted to see her child. She wanted to see her baby. That seemed to be the right thing to do. But Shin Manting didn't dare to say it. Shin Manting pulled her hand away and lowered her head. "I just passed by and thought of sitting here." "Passing by?" Shin Luo was amused. "The capital is so big. Why don't you pass by in the 5th or 4th ring? Can you afford to live in a house here in your current situation? Don't you think you're deliberately extending yourself here?" Shin Luo's words were sharp. Shin Manting only felt a burst of pain in her heart, and her eyes were a little sore. She pulled her hand back and said in a low voice, It's none of your business. It's not like you own this place. Did I offend you by sitting here? Shen Luo and was speechless for a moment. Indeed, it didn't bother him. But as soon as he saw her, he couldn't control himself. God knew that when he saw her just now, Shen Luo, and felt that his heart was about to jump out. After staring at her for a while, he finally mustered up the courage to send a message to confirm. After seeing her pick up her phone, he came forward. He was afraid that he would be scolded as a psychopath like the previous few times. Do you want to see the child? Shen Luo and asked. Yes. He was thinking like a madman. Shen Manting's heart skipped a beat and she looked up at him. However, he didn't dare to say a word. He had said not to regret it. She now regretted it. Shen Luo and was right in front of her. Shen Manting could imagine that there would be a round of humiliation. The baby is fine, Shen Luo and interrupted her. He's growing more and more adorable. He's eating well and sleeping well. He's spending more and more time awake. Don't worry, I'll take good care of him. This string of words was spoken in a calm voice. It was just a statement. However, Shen Manting's heart skipped a beat. The unbearable surging sourness surged up in an instant. The baby was fine, but she couldn't even see it. Shen Luo and noticed the change in her expression. He turned his face away and said, I've told you about the child's recent situation. Don't pass by again in the future. There are people here who know you. It'll be embarrassing if they see you. Was he saying that she was an embarrassment? Shen Manting looked up angrily at his back and shouted, Shen Luo an. Chapter 1992. Shen Manting struggled in silence for a long time before she found her voice. Her heart ached and she said with difficulty, I want to see the baby. Shen Luo An's back was facing her. When he heard this, he inexplicably breathed a sigh of relief. He straightened his body slightly and then turned sideways. He saw Shen Manting's blushing face and seemed to be ashamed. He felt a little complicated, but his face was serious. He stared at her and said slowly, I said that as long as you don't go back that day, the child will have nothing to do with you in the future. That's not up to you. Shen Manting looked up and clenched her fists slightly. I gave birth to the baby. I won't abandon him. But you didn't come back that day. Shen Luo and faced her with a somewhat sarcastic smile on his face. I begged you so much, but you still refused to come back. Now you have the cheek to say that you want this child? Shen Manting frowned and looked up. A man's words carry weight. Shen Luo and looked at her. Unlike you women who only know how to move your lips. As for the rest, He looked up and down at Shen Manting with disdain. You can't do anything. I didn't say that I don't want this child. Shen Manting's face was full of anger. You have acquiesced. Now the child is in my hands and I have the chat records here. Even if you go to the court will only award the child to me. Then I also have custody. You don't. Shen Luo and replied coldly and glanced at her. Don't you feel ashamed when you say that? Shen Luo an. Shen Manting lowered her head slightly and said in a choked voice, I didn't come back to quarrel with you. Now I want to see the child, just one look. One look. I can show you the photo, Shen Luo and said and actually picked up the phone. Shen Manting subconsciously looked at it with desire in her eyes. He had a photo, but she didn't even have a photo. Shen Luo and had been watching her. He looked through it and then handed the phone to her. Shen Manting subconsciously wanted to take it, but Shen Luo and didn't let go. Give it to me. Shen Manting said anxiously. Let me see. This is a cell phone. It's a valuable item. What if you take it away? Shen Luo An's voice was calm, but his words were extremely insulting. Shen Manting was so angry that her neck and eyes turned red. You're such a despicable person. Even if I were poor, I wouldn't steal your cell phone. Shen Luo and didn't continue the conversation. He raised his eyelids, held the phone in his hand and said, Do you want to see it? Shen Manting resisted the urge to look at him. It was Little Moon. There were only a few wrinkled and red photos on her phone, but the video on Shen Luo An's phone showed that the baby had grown up a lot. Her little face was white and tender, becoming very smooth. In the video on the phone, the baby's mouth was slightly open, and he was sucking on his little finger. Saliva was dripping from the corner of his mouth. Oh my, it's dirty. Mrs. Shen's voice. Shen Manting's vision blurred when she heard this voice after a long time. He rubbed his eyes and stared at her. The baby's finger was pulled out, bringing along a silver thread. His little tongue moved and then his little face wrinkled. He was about to cry. Soon he was carried up, and Mrs. Shin's figure appeared in the mirror. Chapter 1993. Although Mrs. Shin said so, she didn't step aside. She picked up the bottle that had been prepared beside her, tested the temperature, and stuffed it into the baby's mouth. The baby looked like he was about to cry, but he was gone in an instant. He sucked on the bottle, clenched his fists, held the bottle, and sucked in big mouthfuls. Mrs. Shin held little Moon in her arms, and there was a happy smile on her face. What a happy family. Shin Manting felt very complicated. Looking at the baby in the video, her desire to get close to him and hug him grew stronger. Are you done? Shin Luo, and put the phone away. Shin Manting was anxious and reached out to grab it. However, she grabbed Shin Luo and's other hand. He put his hand in front of her and looked at her indifferently. Shin Manting's heart skipped a beat, and she withdrew her hand guiltily. Leave if you're done, Shin Luo, and said rudely and kicked the phone back into his pocket. I have to go home to see my son. His words were very tempting to Shin Manting. She also wanted to see the baby and she also wanted to see little Moon. But how could she say it? Shin Manting's lips moved but she still didn't say a word. Shin Luo and glanced at her, then turned around and walked away. He didn't hesitate and he didn't stop. Shin Manting watched as he walked further and further away, and her heart became more and more empty. Shin Manting followed him silently, and she crossed her arms and looked at his back. Shin Luo and seemed to notice it and he suddenly stopped in his tracks. Shin Manting didn't avoid him. She walked forward, lowered her head slightly and said, Shin Luo, and I want to see him. Haven't you finished watching? Shin Luo and didn't turn around and his back was facing her. What else do you want? You know that I don't just want to watch the video. Shin Manting bit her lower lip, and her voice gradually trembled and choked with sobs. I haven't seen him for a long time. Shin Luo and pulled a long face. You asked for it. With that he sneered and then walked forward quickly. His pace was more than twice as fast as before. Shin Manting knew that she was in the wrong, but the desire to see the baby in her heart grew stronger. She looked at him and followed silently. A neighbor was surprised to see Shin Manting. Manting, you're back. Shin Manting's face stiffened and she stopped moving. Shin Luo and kept walking in the direction of his house. For some reason, Shin Manting felt a chill run down her spine when she looked at her neighbor. He didn't chase her away, but Shin Manting's footsteps seemed to be frozen at this moment. His figure went further and further away and soon he disappeared. The neighbor looked at Shin Manting, then at Shin Luo and asked, did they quarrel? When he took a closer look he exclaimed, Io, why does your complexion look so bad? You've lost so much weight. You used to be chubby. Shin Manting felt her entire body stiffen. She quickly turned around and said, you've got the wrong person. Then he quickly walked back. His footsteps were getting faster and faster, faster and faster, and finally he was running. Her heart was beating fast and she was gasping for breath. Tears were already streaming down her cheeks. He calmed himself down, wiped his eyes, and immediately took the subway back. Shin Luo and didn't look back as he walked. He didn't know when Shin Manting had stopped following him. Chapter 1994. He didn't know why, but he suddenly couldn't hold his breath any longer. Standing at his door, Shin Luo and sat down on the steps. The wind blew gently and the flowers in the courtyard swayed. Spring was here. The surroundings were filled with lush greenery. The flowers that should have bloomed had all bloomed. Those who were supposed to be defeated had been defeated. He didn't know how long he had been sitting on the steps, watching the sun get smaller and smaller. He actually felt a little like a lunatic. Ha! Shin Luo and stood up, patted the dust and muttered to himself, isn't that a lunatic? He turned around and entered the house. As soon as he entered, he heard little Moon crying loudly. Seeing Shin Luo and return, Nanny He, who was at her wit's end, finally breathed a sigh of relief and said, come and hug your son. He's crying so hard that he didn't pee or defecate. He won't even drink milk. I don't know what's wrong with him. Shin Luo and took it and stared at the baby for a long time. He slowly said, he probably misses Mom. Stop it. Nanny He rebuked. He doesn't even know who Mom is. How can he miss Mom? Please don't catch a cold. When Madam comes back later, let her take a look at him. But it was amazing. After Shin Luo and hugged the baby for a while, little Moon's crying gradually subsided and he started to hiccup. Nanny He teased, I don't think he misses Mom. He misses Dad. Little Moon stopped crying and stared at Shin Luo with his dark, watery eyes. Are you hungry? Shin Luo and held the baby with one hand and stood up to get the bottle for him. The milk in the bottle was freshly brewed, so the temperature was just right. He stuffed it into the baby's mouth and he immediately hugged it. Shenluo and was usually tired from work and in a bad mood. As long as he came home and saw the baby and hugged him, he would naturally relax. But today he couldn't relax no matter what. After coaxing the baby to sleep, Shenluo and sat on the bed in a daze. After a while he went out. Shenjilia and his wife sat in the living room, snuggling together and looking at their phones. Yi Qianshan occasionally reached out to tap on the screen. When she saw Shenluo and she said, "Big brother, it's almost time to eat." "Okay." Shenluo and responded and then sat down. He picked up an orange and started to peel it. Shenjilia's eyes were glued to the phone, but he didn't forget to glance up at Shenjilia. Then he quickly put down his phone and said with a serious face, "Brother, I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first?" "It's bad," Shenluo and replied. "In that case I'll tell you the good news first." Yi Qianshan was speechless. Shenluo and glanced at him. "What?" "I found out that Sister Manting is still alive. I contacted her yesterday and planned to arrange a job for her in the capital. I just didn't have the time to tell you." Shenjilia coughed lightly, looking a little embarrassed. Shenluo and paused in the act of peeling an orange and looked up at him. "Did you call Shen Manting over?" Yi Qianshan and Shenjilia's eyes widened when they heard Shenluo and's question. Yi Qianshan asked, "Big brother, do you already know?" "Yeah." Shenluo and tossed the orange peel away. "I saw it in the park." "Ah." Yi Qianshan was even more shocked. "But wasn't she still in Jiangsu yesterday? She said she would only be back in a few days." Chapter 1995. The bad news is. Shenluo and hesitated and glanced at Yi Qianshan. Yi Qianshan cleared her throat and said, "It was his idea, not mine." "Hey, you sold your husband so quickly." Shenjilia reached out to hold her in his arms and said, "We asked her to come to the capital and arranged a job for her in marketing or research. But I don't have such a job here. Brother, you," Shenluo and squeezed the juice out of the orange in his hand. The fragrance of oranges filled the air. Yi Qianshan was envious of the fruits. She picked one up and started to peel it herself. Shenjilia felt a little uncomfortable under her gaze. He coughed lightly and said, "In any case, you can just arrange for one of them. If it doesn't work out, I'll have no choice but to look for Yang Yi." Yang Yi had been one of Shenjilia's brothers for many years. Although their relationship wasn't as close as Luo Ran's, it was still passable. Right now he was running a small logistics company. It wasn't big, but it was pretty decent. Working at Yang Ye's place is actually pretty good. It's just that it's a little tiring. Recently he often works overtime and doesn't have enough sleep. He's so skinny that he looks like a dried corpse. When Shenluo and heard this, he couldn't bring himself to eat the orange in his hand. He threw it into the dustbin and said coldly, "Why are you so nosy? What does this have to do with you? Shen Manting is willing to be self-reliant. What's the difference between you and Charity? Do you think she will accept it?" Of course not. The poorer a person was, the more proud they were. He had always thought that he was unyielding and didn't need any external help. Otherwise, it would be considered as charity and food given in destitution. In particular, Shen Manting had some mental problems. Her brain circuitry was not something that normal people like them could understand. When Shenjilia heard Shenluo and's words, he pursed his lips and said, "That's not true. She has to work too. It's not like she's afraid to do anything and just sit there doing nothing. That's called charity." "Ha!" Shenluo and stood up and looked at him. "You don't know anything about Shen Manting. If she finds out that you've tricked her into coming here, she'll probably be disgusted by the sight of you, not to mention the job you've introduced her to you." After saying that, he turned around and went into the bathroom. The sound of running water could be heard. Yi Qianshan and Shenjilia looked at each other. Shenluo and felt extremely irritated. He hadn't seen Shen Manting for a long time, and when he suddenly saw her today, he felt a little sorry for her. Not that he felt sorry for her, but for himself. Pathetic and pitiful. He was clearly a man, but he was so lowly that his mood was controlled by a woman. When she mentioned that she wanted to see the child, he actually thought, why don't we just leave it at that? Let her see the child. Maybe after seeing it she wouldn't bear to leave. However, this thought only lasted for a moment. In the end, this thought was overcome by reason. He was still so calm that he was cruel. "Shenluo, and you big fool." He washed his face and went out. Dinner was ready. After dinner, Shenluo and returned to his room. The baby was very obedient, very obedient. He had been sleeping obediently for more than an hour. More than once, he wondered if it was because he knew his mother wasn't by his side that he was so quiet and rarely cried. He picked up his phone and thought for a moment. He typed a line of words in the chat window with Shin Manting, "Let's meet up." However, after thinking about it, he decided to delete it. He threw the phone aside and lay down. I encountered a small unpleasant incident that affected my mood, so it's even later. I'll make 2 updates before 1 o'clock. Chapter 1996. Shin Luo, and closed his eyes. Before long he heard his phone vibrate. Manting, let's meet. Shin Luo, and was stunned for a while when he saw these words. He stared at it for a while and subconsciously wanted to reply, okay. However, his eyes suddenly moved up and saw a row of messages. Every row was green and every row was sent out by him. He had sent so many messages but she hadn't even replied once. Shin Luo, and was suddenly angry. He deleted the word and then replied, "What's the matter?" Shin Manting could almost imagine what kind of expression he had on his face when he said those 3 words. Distant and indifferent. It must be cold. It was the kind of coldness when looking at an enemy. Shin Manting was a little timid. If she asked him to meet, she would have to endure his sarcasm. If she mentioned the baby, would he say, "You didn't want the baby, I gave you a chance?" Then he would dismiss her with 1 sentence? Shin Manting felt her heart beat heavy and slow. She looked at the 3 words for a long time and then replied, "I think we need to talk." Shin Luo, and I have nothing to talk to you about. The baby is mine. Shin Manting's heart trembled and it was cold. This man was unbelievably heartless. Shin Manting, I gave birth to the baby. Shin Luo, and didn't you say you didn't want it? The expected conversation was neither nutritious nor contentious. But it made Shin Manting stunned for a long time. Shin Manting was overwhelmed with sadness. She sat on the bed in a daze and her heart sank. Ding dong. It was a WeChat notification. Shin Luo, and if you can't eat, I can treat you to a meal. At 11 o'clock tomorrow, I will take the baby out to bask in the sun. Come over if you want to eat. Shin Manting was delighted and immediately replied, okay. After a while Shin Luo, and replied, are you so poor? Has your dignity been eaten by a dog? Shin Manting's heart hurt and she didn't want to reply. She threw the phone away and went to wash off the dust on her body. The next day Shin Manting woke up at 7 o'clock. It would take an hour and a half to get there, which meant that she had an hour to tidy up. She took out the dress that she had treasured. The spring weather was just right to wear this long-sleeve dress. However, the dress she was wearing now was obviously a little too big. It looked wide and hung loosely on his body, not very fitting. However, she did not have a better dress. She carefully took out her old cosmetics. Although it had been some time, it shouldn't have expired. This was the first time she dressed up and put on makeup seriously since she left the Shin family. She looked into the mirror and saw another high-spirited Shin Manting. Good, perfect. The child had started to grow up. What if the child remembered her? Even if she couldn't have the baby, she still wanted to leave a good impression on him. She left the house and took the subway. Unlike yesterday, at this moment, many people on the train would look at Shin Manting. After arriving, she carried her bag and walked to the park. 10:50. Today's weather was very good. There were strong old men and women walking, playing ball games and exercising together. The flowers were red and the grass was green. Shin Manting sat on the same bench as yesterday. She couldn't help but look around for fear that she might miss Shin Luo-han. However, after waiting for a full 20 minutes, they finally saw Shin Luo-han. Chapter 1997. Shin Manting was slightly taken aback and subconsciously looked behind her. However, it was really only Shin Luo, and where's the baby? Shin Manting frowned and felt that she had been deceived. Didn't you say that you brought the baby out to bask in the sun? The sun is so hot at this time. Do you want to burn the baby to death? Shin Luo, and looked at her coldly and then looked her up and down. You were like a village woman yesterday. Are you planning to sell yourself today? Shin Manting heard this and almost rushed up to strangle him. She gritted her teeth and scolded him angrily. You lied to me, Shin Luo-an. Are you still a man? The old people in the park heard her voice and couldn't help but look over. Shin Luo, and glanced at her disapprovingly and said, you know better than anyone whether I'm a man or not. His casual words easily stirred up the dark memories hidden in the depths of her mind. Shin Manting's face turned pale and she turned to leave. Her heart felt as if it had been stabbed by many sharp arrows. It was full of dense bloody holes. Shin Luo, and stood in front of her and reached out to grab her bag. He said, "Aren't you going to eat? Let's go. I'll treat you. There's nothing delicious to eat with you." Shin Manting's shoulders were trembling with anger. Her eyes were slightly red and she said angrily, "Seeing you makes me lose my appetite." Shin Luo and acted as if he didn't hear her. He grabbed her bag with one hand and grabbed her wrist with the other. He said, "Even if you lose your appetite, you can eat it. I'm already out. I have something to say to you. If you have something to say, say it now." Shin Luo and directly pulled her forward. The old people in the park looked at them and thought that it was a young couple quarreling. They didn't care and turned to continue. Shin Manting's eyes were red and she roared, "Shin Luo an. What do you want to eat? No. How about roast duck? No. Let go of me. How about Cantonese cuisine? Hunan cuisine? Sichuan cuisine?" Shin Manting tried to pull her hand back, but it didn't budge. She panted and her breathing became heavy. "I said I don't want to eat with you." Shin Luo An's face finally darkened. He tightened his grip on her wrist and said in a low voice, "Then who do you want to eat with? You dressed up like this. You've seduced me in the past. Are you ready to resume your old career? Why are you always so full of yourself? I'm a woman." Shin Manting couldn't take it anymore and yelled. She choked with sobs. "As a woman, can't I dress up a little? This is the first time I've put on makeup and put on a dress in a long time. I just wanted to see my son. I didn't expect you to lie to me." Tears flowed down her cheeks, but her voice was still firm, and she did not let herself cry out loud. After a while, Shin Manting said in a clear voice, "Moreover, even if I do sell it, what does it have to do with you?" Shin Luo and looked at her for a while, his expression unreadable. After a long time he said, "I want to take care of your business." Shin Manting's face suddenly turned pale. She struggled for a moment, but Shin Luo and quickly changed the topic. "It's good that you're not going to date another man. I originally planned to let you see the child, but if my son's mother is such a piece of trash, then there's no need to see her." Shin Manting grasped the main point and looked at him with hope. "No, I just want to dress up and leave a better impression on my son." "Really?" Chapter 1998. Shin Luo and looked at her and pulled her. Shin Manting didn't move. She took a step forward after being pulled by him. Shin Luo and turned around and strode forward, pulling her with him. Shin Manting didn't make a sound and followed him silently. They arrived at a restaurant. Shin Manting used to come here often and especially liked the food here. It wasn't a fancy restaurant, but Shin Manting hadn't eaten in such an occasion for a long time. She followed Shin Luo and then sat down. The waiter quickly brought the menu and waited for them to order. Shin Luo and ordered a lot of dishes in one breath. She didn't know whether it was a coincidence or not, but she found that she liked many of them. Shin Luo and didn't like spicy food, but she liked it very much. At least half of the dishes he ordered were spicy. Her heart fluttered slightly, and a strange feeling surrounded her. She lowered her head and didn't say anything. She had nothing to add. She looked at him and said, "I'm going to the bathroom." "Okay." Shin Luo and took a sip of tea. "I'll take you to see our son after dinner." Shin Manting's posture stiffened slightly and she quickly left. When she walked to the bathroom, she realized that he wasn't afraid that she would run away, was he? So when she stood up, she deliberately mentioned their son. She had to admit that this was a very effective method. Not to mention that Shin Manting didn't have any intention of running away. Even if she did, she might give up her original plan because of his words. Shin Luo and knew her too well. She went to the bathroom and washed her hands carefully before returning to the dining table. Shin Luo and was on the phone. He looked calm and emotionless. "Got it. I'm eating. We'll talk when we get back," Shin Luo and said lightly. Then, as if he had thought of something, he said, "By the way, Manting will go back with us later. You should get ready." Shin Manting was shocked and looked at him. On the other end of the phone, Shin Luo and said incredulously, "What? She's going to see the baby and then she'll leave." As he spoke, Shin Luo and looked at her as if asking, "Right?" Shin Manting smiled awkwardly and nodded before sitting down. The dishes were quickly served and Shin Luo and hung up the phone. No one spoke first. They ate quietly from the beginning to the end. Shin Manting, on the other hand, felt at ease. She didn't stand on ceremony and ate a lot. Shin Luo and paid the bill and quickly led her home. Looking at the familiar villa, Shin Manting found it difficult to move forward. Although this was not the place where she grew up, she had lived here for several years. In those years there were laughter and pain. Except for Shenluo, and the people inside were all very nice to her. Shen Manting always felt that she owed him. Now that he had set foot on this piece of land again, he felt very complicated. Shenluo, and had already pressed the doorbell. He looked back at Shen Manting, who was a few meters away, and said coldly, "Why aren't you coming over? You want me to invite you?" Shen Manting moved her lips as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. She could only give up. He walked forward and soon the door opened. When Nanny he saw Shenluo and she said, "You're finally back, baby?" But before he could finish his sentence he caught a glimpse of another figure behind Shenluo Han. Chapter 1999. Shen Manting smiled awkwardly and said, "Nanny he." It was a familiar voice. Nanny he looked at Shen Manting for a while and said, "Miss, come in." Miss, these two words were really ironic. Shen Manting didn't know how she felt at the moment. She pursed her lips and followed Shenluo, and inside. Aunt Zhang was holding the baby and coaxing him. She was surprised to see Nanny he come in with a strange woman behind the young master. She asked casually, "Who is this?" "The baby's mother." Shenluo, Anne's voice was low and unfriendly. Nanny Zhang's eyelids twitched and she couldn't help but look at Shen Manting. Didn't they say that the baby's mother was dead? How did such a big living person die just like that? But she didn't dare to ask and could only nod. Shenluo, and stepped forward and took the baby. The baby had obviously been crying. His big black eyes were wet and his long eyelashes were stuck in his eyes. Shenluo, and saw him and reached out to pull him out. Shen Manting couldn't help but step forward and say, "He's so big." "That's right," Shenluo, and replied. He glanced at her indifferently. "If you're any more heartless, he'll grow bigger by the time you come again." His voice was calm, but it made Shen Manting's face burn. Nanny he and the other servant were looking at her. This man didn't give her any face at all. Shen Manting silently carried the baby over. Her cheeks were a little red. She looked down and saw the baby's white and tender face. He was growing well. He was at least 2 or 3 times heavier than he was 2 months ago. He didn't look like a 3-month-old baby. She would believe it even if someone told her that he was 4 or 5 months old. She caressed the baby's little face lovingly, and the corners of her lips curled into a smile. "Sit down. Don't you feel tired standing?" Shenluo, and sat down on the sofa and said, "Aunt Zhang, bring a bottle of milk." "Yes." Aunt Zhang answered and hurriedly went to bring Nanny he with her. "What's going on?" Aunt Zhang asked. Nanny he glanced at him and said in a low voice, "Just do what you need to do. It's none of our business to ask about the boss's business. Anyway, that woman is the baby's mother." "Biological? You can adopt him?" "Then why did eldest young master say that she died? This person is still alive and well. She looks quite strong and very good looking." Nanny he glanced at the living room and said, "Sigh, I don't know how to put it. Anyway, it's quite complicated. Make your milk. I'll go make some tea." Aunt Zhang saw that she was so stubborn that she couldn't open her mouth no matter how hard she tried. Unwilling to give up, she turned her head and muttered, "If you ask me, it must be a couple quarreling. Young master is also like that. Who can stand it? Do what you need to do." Nanny he did not know what to do with her. She made some tea and went out. Shenluo and Shen Manting sat on the sofa, facing each other. Shen Manting held the baby in her arms and smiled. The baby seemed to recognize her. He was grinning, revealing his pink and tender gums. His little mouth was full of saliva and almost dripped out. When Nanny he saw this, she muttered to herself, "She's indeed a biological mother. She doesn't even smile so happily when they've been hugging and coaxing her for a long time." Chapter 2000. "Thank you," Shen Manting said. Nanny he smiled, then glanced at them, put down the teacup and left. Aunt Zhang brought the milk powder over and said, "Young master, it's ready. Give it to her." Shenluo, and pointed at Shen Manting. Shen Manting glanced at it and reached out to take it. She tested the temperature and frowned, saying, "It's so hot." Aunt Zhang was a little dissatisfied when she heard that. But she still said, "I was thinking that he might not be hungry so soon. He might drink it after a while, so I heated it up a little." Shen Manting didn't say anything and put the bottle on the coffee table in front of her. Aunt Zhang glanced at her and saw that she didn't say anything, so she turned and left. But after a while, the baby stretched out his hands and looked like he was about to cry. Shen Manting saw that the baby must be hungry. She touched the bottle and found that the temperature was still a little high. She tested it and frowned, saying, Lower the temperature. It's too hot. How can the baby eat it? Aunt Zhang came over and said, then I'll add some cold water. What? Shin Manting thought she heard wrong. What did you say? Aunt Zhang was confused. She didn't think there was anything wrong and said, cold water? Where did you hire this aunt? Is she a child caretaker? How dare you add cold water to the baby's milk? Shin Manting laughed as if she had heard a joke. Hold it. I'll do it. Aunt Zhang was a little angry and said, what's wrong with adding cold water? He's still drinking it. The baby is still so young. What if he gets sick from adding cold water to his milk? How can you take responsibility? Shin Manting handed the baby to Shin Luo and then said angrily, he's not your child. How can you be so careless? Aunt Zhang was also unconvinced and shouted, do you really have to be like this? Do you really think you're a mistress? The baby seemed to be frightened and began to cry. Shin Manting didn't expect to be criticized like this. She looked at Nanny He, who had heard the noise and rushed over. She asked, Nanny He, who is she? Nanny He was still working and wiped her apron twice. She smiled awkwardly and said, a new aunt. She's been here for less than half a month. Go back. There's no need to come back. Shin Luo and stood up with the baby in his arms. His expression was grim. You don't have any common sense at all. How can you take care of a child like this? Auntie Zhang was flustered and exasperated. Fine, I won't do it. My 3 children were raised like this. Why are rich people so squeamish? Nanny He, Shin Luo and called out. Nanny He quickly nodded and pulled Aunt Zhang along. Let's go. Who would add raw water to such a young child's milk? Who said I'm adding raw water? I'm talking about cold-boiled water. Aunt Zhang finally understood. She turned around and said, young master, I'm talking about cold-boiled water. You can drink it after mixing it evenly. Shin Manting had already entered the kitchen with the milk bottle. Shin Luo and glanced at her and said, you don't have to come again. Let's go. Nanny He tugged at her. What kind of nanny has such a bad temper? Just based on what you said just now, you can't stay. And Zhang felt wronged. I didn't say anything. Young mistress. Nanny He said in a low voice, who are you to decide who will be the young mistress? Aunt Zhang was speechless for a moment. Indeed, what she said was a little inappropriate. Chapter 2001. Aunt Zhang was puzzled. She looked at Shin Luo, but didn't say anything. She turned around and left. Shin Luo and held the baby in his arms. The baby's face was red from crying. He waved his hands and his voice sounded childish and heart-wrenching. Shin Manting soaked the bottle in cold water and waited for it to cool down before she came out. She walked quickly and her heart was in her throat. She rushed forward and stuffed the bottle into the baby's mouth. As soon as the baby's mouth was blocked, he stopped crying. She hugged the milk bottle and sucked hard, drinking a little too quickly. Shin Manting looked at the baby and her face softened. She looked up at Shin Luo and then asked, do you want a hug? Shin Luo and handed it over. Shin Manting took it and held the bottle in her hand. Her heart softened. Where do you live now? Shin Luo and looked at the baby and asked abruptly. Shin Manting looked up and found that he wasn't looking at her. She asked weakly, you're asking me? Who else would I ask if not you? Shin Luo and looked away and stood up. Tongzhou, so far away? Shin Luo and looked at her and then at the baby. You made me fire the nanny I hired to take care of the baby. What should I do now? You let this kind of nanny take care of the baby? Shin Manting found it ridiculous. Are you crazy? I had no choice. It's not long after the new year. Few nannies of her age are willing to be nannies. It's not suitable to find a young one. Shin Luo and put his hands in his pockets. Now that the nanny is gone, you have to compensate me. Shin Manting was annoyed and retorted, how can you be so unreasonable? You were the one who fired him, not me. I wouldn't have fired her if you hadn't pointed out her small problem. You call this a small problem? Shin Manting was angry. Isn't the baby your own? She wanted to add cold water to your son's milk. What if the baby got a stomach ache? Is this a small problem? Shin Luo and glanced at her. I don't know if she used to do this, but the baby has always been fine. Shin Manting was exasperated. Are you my real father? It was a mistake for me to give the baby to you. His voice was a little loud and the baby seemed to be frightened as it whimpered. Shin Manting looked down and saw that the baby's eyebrows were red and wrinkled. He looked like he was about to cry. She quickly patted his little body and softly said, don't cry, don't cry. Mommy was wrong. The baby reached out and carelessly touched her cheek. Shin Manting's heart warmed, but she didn't forget to glare at him. And Zhang has left. There's no one at home to take care of the child. You should take care of him. Shin Luo and looked at her. You're his biological mother. You'll definitely be better at taking care of him than anyone else. Shin Manting was stunned. She couldn't figure out what he was trying to do. When she didn't respond, he continued, think about it. No. Shin Manting subconsciously refused. But looking at the baby in her arms, she couldn't say anything else. Where's Mother He? Where is Auntie Wu? Auntie Wu went back to her hometown before the Lunar New Year. She won't be coming anymore. Nanny He has to do the housework. She has to handle everything in the house. That's why I hired an auntie. I didn't expect her to have such a bad temper. Shin Manting looked at the infant. Chapter 2002. This way it will show that it has been updated, but in fact, it will replace the previous chapters. You can click on the chapters that you have already read and there will be no charge. Everyone, this announcement has already been made once. I don't know why you didn't see it, but I will make it again here. Chapter 2003. The baby's pink lips were still dripping with milk. It looked soft and adorable, and Shin Manting's heart was about to melt. Fortunately, she was fired. Otherwise, the baby wouldn't even know it when he was abused. Shin Luo An's expression was calm as he sat down. If you don't want to, I'll hire another nanny, but I don't know if she'll treat the baby like Aunt Zhang. Wasn't this clear enough? He wanted Shin Manting to stay, but why didn't he say it out loud? Nanny He was anxious when she heard this. But she was too embarrassed to interrupt the couple's conversation. Shin Manting held the baby in her arms and fell silent. Stay and take good care of the baby. Yes, how could a nanny take care of the baby be better than a biological mother? Shin Manting was a little tempted. The baby squinted and was a little drowsy. His face was a little pink and his skin was delicate. What if he was abused by another nanny? It won't happen, Shin Manting suddenly said in a firm voice. She didn't know if she was trying to convince Shin Luo and or herself. With Nanny He here, how could there be a nanny who would abuse the baby? It won't happen. Besides, your mother doesn't go to the hospital often. She'll help take care of the baby, right? The whole family was here and it was impossible for all of them to go out, right? Isn't Julia married? You can ask his wife to help. That's Julia's wife, not mine. Why should she help me take care of the baby? Shin Luo frowned and said, since you're so unwilling, forget it. You can go back. Shin Luo stood up as he spoke and reached out to take the baby away. Shin Manting resisted. She held the baby in her arms and took a step back, unwilling to let go. Shin Luo An's expression darkened and he asked, what do you mean? Shin Manting said sheepishly, the baby is almost asleep. Wait a moment. What are you waiting for? Don't think that you can pretend that you love the baby just because you're holding him. Shin Luo An's expression was calm, but his tone was sarcastic. It's a fact that you don't want him. Do you think you can pretend that you didn't do anything wrong by pretending? As he spoke, he pushed her hand away and took the baby in his arms. The baby was about to fall asleep, but was woken up by Shin Luo An's hug. She pouted and blushed, ready to cry. Shin Manting felt a pang in her heart as she watched. But soon he turned around and quickly said, I'm sorry, thank you for letting me see him. After that, he picked up his bag from the sofa and walked out quickly. Nanny He felt a pang in her heart when she saw Shin Manting's expression. After a while, she turned to look at Shin Luo and then said, how can you say that? It's not easy for Miss to come back. What will happen if you let her hold the baby more? Shin Luo An's face remained expressionless when he heard this. He said, some people have to be kept in suspense. When she's done humiliating herself, she'll naturally change her mind. Then she carried the baby back to the room. Nanny He stomped her feet angrily and heartbrokenly. What a jerk. Who would want to stay after saying that? Fortunately, it wasn't her son, otherwise she would have strangled him to death. Chapter 2004. When Shin Manting came out of the Shen family, she couldn't hold back her tears. Every word that Shin Luo had said seemed to stab into her heart. Yes, she was the one who didn't want the child. In order to leave Shin Luo, she even gave up the child. It was also proved that Shin Luo took good care of the child. He was fair and chubby. If she had raised him by her side, he wouldn't have become like this. She had to survive and she had to live. Therefore she had to work, she had to earn money, and she had to support herself first. When Shin Luo asked her to stay and take care of the baby, Shin Manting was tempted. But it seemed that she was used to it and she immediately refused. In the past, she would have convinced herself that she was afraid of Shin Luo An's violence. But after spending time with Shin Luo and during the confinement period, and after seeing him later, Shin Manting's mood had obviously eased a lot. When she saw Shin Luo and it was no longer because she was afraid. It was because Shin Manting couldn't tell why. It seemed that avoiding Shin Luo and refusing him had become a habit. Realizing this, Shin Manting suddenly laughed at herself. What a terrible habit. It was so terrible that she even lost the child. When she returned to the small rented house in Tongzhou, the room was very dark. Shin Manting didn't turn on the light. Instead, she walked to the mirror and looked at herself in the bright and beautiful mirror. Suddenly Shin Manting was not used to it. She looked so beautiful. She was so beautiful that she didn't look like Shin Manting. Ding dong. It was a WeChat notification. She looked down and took out her phone from her bag. It was from Sisai, who had recruited her last time. Sisai. Hello, have you arrived in the capital? Mopi. Yes, I'm in Tongzhou. Sisai. Okay, then please come to XX District XX Road North number 89 for an interview tomorrow morning. Mopi heart. Okay. Yi Qianshan saw Shinjilia's message and was very nervous. She said, is it really okay for us to lie to people like this? I think Shin Manting is very pitiful. What if she finds out that it's all a scam? Will she go crazy? Shinjilia stuffed the phone back to her and said carelessly, maybe, but I really asked her to come for an interview. Bah, you said it's a job in the book marketing department. What are you talking about? Besides, it's not just the job that's different. The salary and benefits are different too. If she finds out that we're the ones who lied to her, won't she be even angrier? Don't worry. I've already taken care of the salary. It's just that the job is a little tough. I'm not sure if Sister Manting can handle it. How hard? I leave early and return late. How early and how late? If she lives in Tongzhou, she might have to leave an hour and a half earlier to catch the subway to get here. F***ck me? Are you crazy? Yi Qianshan found it hard to believe. Didn't you say that there would be a staff dormitory? Didn't we agree on that before? Yeah, so I rented a dormitory for Yang Ye's female employees. They've probably moved in already. That's good. Yi Qianshan breathed a sigh of relief. The interview went very smoothly. Although Shin Manting had some doubts about the position, the salary and benefits were similar to what was stated in the WeChat message, so she didn't ask any more questions. After moving from Tongzhou, Shin Manting only had a large backpack with her. The probation period was only 3 days. During those 3 days, Shin Manting ran up and down. She was really exhausted, but she felt a sense of fulfillment. However, on the 4th day when she officially started work, she received bad news. Chapter 2005. Shin Manting clocked in at the office, changed into her work uniform, and was about to start work when she received a call. There was no name on the number, but it was very familiar. It was Shin Luo An. Shin Manting hung up the phone and started to prepare her tools. He had all the banknotes and a series of preparations to make. About 3 minutes after he finished, his phone rang again. However, it wasn't Shin Luo, and this time. It was a landline number. Territory Imperial Capital. It was not the Shin family's landline number. Shin Manting pondered for a moment before answering the call. Hello. It was the voice of a middle-aged woman. It sounded a little noisy. Hello, this is Imperial Capital Rinshin Hospital. I'm the head nurse of the pediatrics department. Shin Yueshao has a high fever that hasn't subsided. It's been half a day and his fever has reached 39 degrees Celsius. Shin Yueshao. What? Shin Manting couldn't react for a moment. After a while, she suddenly remembered that wasn't the baby's name. Hurry up and come back to take care of the child. Don't quarrel with the child's father. The child has a high fever. The head nurse's voice was full of reproach and impatience. Call your man. No one can take care of him better than his own mother. Shin Manting's mind was buzzing, and the head nurse hung up the phone. She hurriedly called Shin Luo, and the call was quickly picked up. The voice sounded a little hoarse. Hello. Shin Luo An. I heard that the child is sick? Shin Manting's voice was filled with panic. As she spoke, she had already walked to her wardrobe. The other side responded in a low voice. When Shin Manting heard this, she became even angrier and yelled, Is this how you take care of the child? You're such a good father to have a fever like that. He didn't bother to hide his voice at all. His colleagues looked over. What are you doing? At least I can take care of the child. Where have you been? Shen Luo and retorted sarcastically, the baby is on N4 drip now. He's had a fever since last night. If the fever continues, he'll become retarded. Shen Manting's heart was pounding and her mind was in a mess. He hung up the phone and hurriedly took out his clothes to change before he went to the leader to ask for leave. Fortunately, the leader was still reasonable. When they heard that the child was sick, they didn't say anything and just let him go. This place was a little far from Benevolent Heart Hospital, and it was rush hour. This was the bad thing about the imperial capital. No matter what mode of transportation, there would always be terrible traffic jams. There was a traffic jam on the highway and a traffic jam on the subway. Fortunately, Shen Manting squeezed through the crowd and waited for the subway 3 times before she finally got on the train. There were fewer people at the Renxin subway station. Shen Manting walked quickly and soon left the road. Shen Manting was panting heavily when she found the place Shen Luo and had mentioned. The child was asleep and his body was red from the fever. Shen Manting reached out and touched it. It was shockingly hot. Heavens! Tears welled up in Shen Manting's eyes. Why did he suddenly have such a high fever? What kind of nanny did you hire for him? Shen Luo and was already in a terrible fix. When he heard this, he closed his eyes and scratched his head. Shen Manting was exasperated. She kicked him and said, "Are you mute? Say something." "I've already said that a nanny can't take care of him as well as a real mother. Half of the credit goes to you for the baby's current state." Shen Luo and frowned impatiently. "How dare you blame me?" Chapter 2006. Her voice was choked with sobs, but she didn't forget to glare at Shen Luo and as she spoke. Shen Luo and looked at her tears and sighed heavily. He said helplessly, "Why are you crying? You're cooling down now." Shen Manting went up to take a look. There was a baby patch on the baby's forehead, and he was still receiving N4 drip. Shen Manting's heart ached when her little feet were tied up. "Can you lower his temperature?" She looked at Shen Luo and with a hopeful expression. "No, the temperature is too high." Shen Luo and sighed. "I didn't go home the day before yesterday. I left the baby with Nanny He." Would Nanny He be so careless with her children? Shen Manting frowned and wiped away her tears. "And where did you go? Why didn't you come home?" Shen Luo and furrowed his brows and looked at Shen Manting. He seemed to have calmed down a little and said, "Shen Manting, I have a job too. I have things to do too. You said that the nanny is unreliable, so I didn't hire a nanny. I left the baby with Nanny He. Mom was at home the day before yesterday, but she went out." Shen Manting stopped talking. She wanted to hold the infant, but she was afraid that she might accidentally touch him and make him uncomfortable. The nurse walked in and saw Shen Manting. She said, "You must be the baby's mother. Come, keep an eye on him. When he wakes up later, remember to feed him some medicine to reduce his fever." The nurse was holding a small packet of granules in her hand. It was the first time Shen Manting had seen such a thing. She nodded repeatedly. "Give him the medicine after he drinks the milk. Will take a while." "All right." Shen Manting turned to look at Shen Luo on. "Did you bring milk powder?" "Yes." Shen Luo and pointed to another place. There was not only milk powder, but also paper diapers and a kettle for boiling water. There was also a large bottle of mineral water next to it. It was obvious that it was brought from home. It was obvious that the milk powder had already been washed once. Shen Manting went over to boil the water and left it there for a long time before the milk was added. The baby woke up with a whimper. Shen Luo and looked at the 4 drip that was about to run out. As she coaxed the child, she pressed the call button. The nurse pulled out the needle and frowned. "It's still hot. As parents, you have to pay more attention. It's bad for such a young child to catch a cold." Shen Manting and Shen Luo and remained silent. Shen Luo and picked up the baby and sat on the bed. Shen Manting held the bottle and said, "The temperature is fine. Let the baby drink it." However, when she stuffed the pacifier into the baby's mouth, the baby refused to drink. She twisted her head, her face flushed red, and she didn't even open her eyes. Shen Manting's heart ached even more. She reached out and took it. Shen Luo and stood up and said, "The baby hasn't had milk for a long time. He used to drink once every hour or so. Now it's been 3 hours. Ah." Shen Manting became even more anxious when she heard that. "What should we do? Force it down?" Shen Luo and looked at him. He might feel better after taking some medicine. Shin Manting frowned, but she still adopted Shin Luo An's method. The two of them tossed and turned for a while. Although the baby didn't eat much, he still ate. Shin Luo and fed the baby some medicine. After crying for a while, the baby fell asleep. Shin Manting couldn't stop hugging him. Her heart ached and she blamed herself. From time to time, Shin Luo and would also reach out to touch it. Fortunately, his fever had finally subsided. Shin Luo and used an ear thermometer on the baby. The temperature was only 37.5 degrees. He finally breathed a sigh of relief. When Shin Manting saw that, she was finally relieved. Chapter 2007. Whatever. Shin Luo and glanced at her. It's not for sale outside. You know my taste. Just buy whatever you like. How about noodles? Shin Luo and asked casually. I want to eat. Didn't you say anything? Shin Manting glared at him and said, whatever you want then. Shin Luo, who had been suppressing his emotions for a long time, suddenly felt a lot better. He quickly walked out, and when he came back he was already carrying 2 bags. However, there were 2 more people in the room. Shinjilia and Yi Chanshan were inside. Yi Chanshan was sitting on the bed, while Shinjilia was fussing about changing diapers. When Shinjishua saw Shin Luo, and he said, hey, you bought so many things. Did you know we were coming? When Yi Chanshan saw that, she nudged Shinjilia and said, since Big Brother is back, let's go. The baby's fever has subsided. We have to tell Mommy the good news. What's the hurry? Shinjilia pulled a diaper over. Big Brother is finally back. Let's sit down and have a chat. What are you talking about? Yi Chanshan glared at him. Are you trying to starve me to death? Let's go eat first. His eyes were filled with warning. Shinjilia was at a loss for words. He said, all right, my wife has the final say. Come on, let's go eat. The young couple finally left. As soon as Yi Chanshan stepped out of the room, she smacked Shinjilia and said, are you silly? Big brother and sister-in-law have finally gotten together. Why don't you just leave them alone and eat together? Who knows, they might even rekindle their old feelings and rekindle their love. When Shinjilia heard that, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. What did you say? Love what fire? Have they ever been together? Go away, what do you know? Yi Chanshan took his hand and analyzed. If a woman doesn't love that man, it's impossible for her to give birth to his child. Look, she's so nervous about the child. This shows that the child is very important to her. That's why she's so concerned about it. Besides, if she really hated Big Brother, she wouldn't have come back to the capital. That's right. Yeah. Shinjilia's eyes turned into crescents. Yes, my wife is right. Yi Chanshan glared at him. You don't believe me? Yes. Then why are you laughing? I laughed. I didn't expect you to be so smart. Yi Chanshan was annoyed and elbowed him. Go to hell. You're laughing at me? Shinjilia chuckled as he blocked the attack and quickly apologized. In the ward, Shin Luo and spread out the lunch boxes he had just bought and asked casually, what did they say to you? No, I just asked about the baby. Shin Luo and opened the lunch box and put down the small table on the bed. Let's eat. The baby has never been sick before? No. Shin Luo and didn't even raise his head. I've been taking care of it all by myself. I rarely touch it. A few days ago, I couldn't leave the laboratory. So weak. Shin Manting felt that it was too much of a coincidence. She looked at the baby in her arms and felt his body temperature. She was still in shock. Shin Luo, and, are you busy in the lab? I'm busy. Shin Luo, and didn't even raise his head. I've already rested for too long this year. I'm especially busy at this time of the year. You know that. She knew, how could she not know? Chapter 2008. Shin Luo and had already set up the lunch box. When he heard this, he paused and looked up at her. Shin Manting looked conflicted and said, the baby is still young. I want to take care of him for a while and let him live with me for a while. Is that okay? She was asking for his opinion. Shin Luo and had already guessed it in his heart. With a self-deprecating smile, Shin Luo and sat down and handed her a bowl of rice. Of course. Why not? Shin Manting's eyes lit up and she asked, really? Yes, but he must be taken care of at home. The child can't go anywhere. Shin Luo and looked at her. When I first brought him from Jiangsu, he was not acclimatized. I won't take him far away. I'll stay in the capital. Shin Manting looked at him. I have a job in the capital. I can afford to raise him. It was a monthly salary of 5,000 yuan, and accommodation was included. If she ate sparingly, it would be enough to raise the child. Shenluo and had a mocking smile on his face. What kind of job? How can you take care of the child at the same time? His smile was a little malicious. Shin Manting saw it and was angry. She said angrily, "What do you mean?" "What do I mean? Why are you so sensitive?" Shenluo and looked away and said. Shin Manting was even more angry. "Can't you speak properly?" "Didn't I speak properly?" Shenluo and glanced at her. "I didn't yell at you or scold you. Why can't you speak properly?" Shin Manting was speechless for a moment. Looking at him eating slowly, her stomach was also growling. "Don't say that I mistreated you." Shenluo and put a pair of chopsticks on the lunchbox. "Let's talk after eating." Shin Manting felt very uncomfortable. Looking at Shenluo and's calm appearance, she felt even more angry. She carefully put the baby down, wiped her hands, removed the chopsticks, and began to eat happily. No matter what, she couldn't make things difficult for herself. After eating, Shin Manting consciously cleaned up and threw the food into the trash can. Shenluo and wiped the corner of his mouth and said slowly, "Move in. Aunt Zhang just left, so there's a nanny room." "You want me to be a nanny?" Shin Manting couldn't believe it. She was the baby's biological mother. Could it be that she needed to be paid to be a nanny to take care of her own child? How ironic. "What else do you want to be?" Shenluo and looked at her and sneered. "Young madam? Or a wet nurse?" Shin Manting stopped talking and felt an inexplicable pain in her heart. He felt terrible. It was unbearable. "You've been trying to distance yourself from me and the baby? Wouldn't it be too unfair for you to marry me?" Shenluo and stood up and wiped his hands with a wet tissue. "So, I have no choice but to make you a nanny. I'm giving you a chance. You can take care of the baby and I can rest assured. I won't treat you shabbily in terms of salary." He casually tossed the wet tissue away and with an unknown expression he said softly, "You know, I've always been very generous to you." He didn't say anything harsh, but every word seemed to stab at her heart. Shin Manting felt a lump in her throat and tears welled up in her eyes. She swallowed hard and leaned over to check on the baby's tiny body. It was much better than before. However, the scorching heat from before was still lingering in his hand. Chapter 2009. "Okay." Shin Manting's voice was soft. Shenluo and looked at her and seemed a little surprised. "I promise you." Shin Manting looked at the baby and her voice was so soft that no one knew where it came from. As soon as she agreed, Shin Manting went to resign. She apologized to her supervisor and boss and went to the Shin family that day. Shin Manting didn't have much luggage. She only had a small suitcase and a small backpack with her toiletries and other things that she couldn't bear to throw away. Shin Manting was a little hesitant when she arrived. But after thinking about it, she still rang the doorbell. Nanny he quickly opened the door and saw Shin Manting carrying the luggage. She was stunned and said, "Miss?" Shin Manting smiled awkwardly. Nanny he immediately reacted and said, "Come in quickly. Here, give it to me." She reached out to take the suitcase from Shin Manting. Shin Manting quickly said, "No, I can do it myself." "Nanny he, where is the room of the aunt who left last time? I'll move in." Nanny he was stunned again. "That's the nanny's room." "Yes, it's the nanny's room." Shin Manting's face was a little hot and she said, "From now on, I'll be the nanny of the family." Nanny he felt ridiculous and laughed. But when she looked at Shin Manting, she realized that she didn't seem to be joking. For a moment, the two of them froze. Their expressions were indescribably awkward. Just then, the door of the room opened and the baby's voice was heard. Shenluo walked out with the baby in his arms and glanced at it. He said, "Nanny he, take her to Aunt Zhang's room and help her tidy up. From now on, she'll come to our house to take care of the baby." When Nanny he heard Shenluo and's words, she still couldn't believe it and said, "Young master, do you know what you're talking about? She's Miss Manting." "Go." Shenluo glanced at it and then his eyes fell on Shin Manting. "I'm going out later. I need to go to the laboratory. You take care of the baby." When Shin Manting heard that, she was angry and said, "Do you have any conscience? The baby is so feverish and you're still in the mood to work." Shenluo sneered and said, "Since you're here to be a nanny, you should act like one. What kind of standpoint are you using to talk to me? Have you forgotten how I fired Aunt Zhang?" Shin Manting paused for a moment, then gritted her teeth and said, "I'm the mother of the child. If the child's mother wasn't here, I wouldn't have been able to leave." Shenluo and glanced at her and then turned around. Shin Manting was stunned. "Hurry up, I'm in a hurry," Shin Luo urged. Shin Manting pulled her luggage into the room. However, the moment she entered, she felt that it was a little unbearable. "This is the nanny's room?" The room was small and dark. Next to the washing machine behind the balcony. The rectangular room looked like a corridor, but both sides were blocked, so it looked like a small room. There was only one bed at one end. The bed was 1.2 meters long and there was a bedside table. At the other end was a bathroom. It was very small. There was a toilet and a shower, but it didn't even have a sink. Was this really livable? Chapter 2010. Nanny. He saw her expression and said, "This is the smallest nanny's room. It's a small cubicle. Why don't you stay in my room when I'm free?" Shin Manting shook her head and said, "That's it. I'll be a nanny in the future. There's no difference in treatment." She said, "Miss, young master is probably just joking with you. It's not like you don't know him. He has a nasty mouth, but he might not be thinking the same way. You should go and apologize to him. You can still take care of the baby. You don't have to stay here anymore. Then where should I live?" Shin Manting laughed self-deprecatingly. "I'm not the daughter here, nor am I Shin Luo, Anne's sister. It's most suitable for me to live here." As she spoke, she put down her suitcase and said, "I'll go take the baby first. I'll clean up later. Nanny, you go ahead." "Okay, go ahead." Shin Manting placed her handbag on the bed and walked out of the room. Shin Luo had coaxed the baby to sleep. He put him in the crib. When he saw her come in, he said, "If anything happens to the baby later, call me immediately." "Nonsense," Shin Manting frowned. "He'll be fine." Shin Luo propped himself up and took off his clothes. Shin Manting was shocked and asked, "What are you doing?" Shin Luo paused and glanced at her. With a natural expression, he said, "I'm changing." He casually threw the clothes into the basket and slowly opened the wardrobe. He took out a piece of clothing and slowly put it on before turning to leave. Shin Manting felt a little uncomfortable. After he left, she dared to turn around and look. Shin Luo Anne's room was very big. It was also a master bedroom. There was a large cloakroom and a 2-meter bed. The bathroom in the suite was fully equipped. It was divided into a toilet, a shower, and a bathtub. It was huge. This room alone was bigger than all the houses she had lived in for more than a year. However, when she saw the bed, Shin Manting still couldn't calm down and felt a little scared. Back then, Shin Luo had pressed her on this bed and forced her to do all the things she didn't want. She had been humiliated in all kinds of positions, and he had treated her as a lowly prostitute. Shin Manting's heart tightened, and she suddenly felt that she was extremely cheap. She looked at the baby who was sleeping peacefully in the crib and felt her heart ache. So be it. It seemed that it was too late to turn back now. He walked out and walked to his old room. The room was still empty and tidied up very cleanly. From the looks of it, it should have been converted into a guest room. There were quite a number of rooms in the villa. The door to Shinjilia's room was tightly shut, as was the door to the room next to it. Nanny. He came forward and noticed her gaze. She said, "These 2 rooms are second young master's. The room he used to live in was too small. Now that he's married, he's using a bigger room. The couple is buying an apartment. The renovations are already done. They'll probably move out at the end of the year." Shin Manting nodded and sighed. "Jilia has grown up." "Yes." Nanny. He smiled. "Everyone in the family is getting happier and happier. All that's left is young master." Shin Manting fell silent and looked at her. Chapter 2011. Nanny. He sighed faintly and said, "During that period of time, eldest young master was really in a bad state. He rarely went to work and rarely spoke. Sometimes he didn't even eat and would sit in his room for most of the day." Shin Manting stopped talking and turned to look at the baby. The baby was sleeping soundly. Although his facial features were still immature, his nose and mouth were identical to Shin Luo Anne's. "Miss, I'll leave first. Sir and Madam will be back soon," Nanny. He said. Shin Manting nodded and began to tidy up the baby's belongings. Sure enough, Shin Longyue and Mrs. Shin returned after a while. As soon as she returned, she asked Nanny He about the child's whereabouts. Mrs. Shin walked into Shin Luo Anne's room with a distressed expression. When she saw Shin Manting, she was slightly stunned. Shin Manting smiled awkwardly and said, "Hello, Mrs. Shin. Long time no see." Only then did Madam Shin regain her senses. She looked at her and turned her head in a daze, shouting, "Long Yu! Manting is back." Shen Longyue had just put down his briefcase when he heard this. He immediately walked up to her and was slightly surprised to see her. Then, a look of joy appeared on his calm face as he asked, "Manting?" Shen Manting nodded awkwardly and smiled. "Sir." The smile on Shen Longyue's face froze when he heard this obviously distant form of address. He turned to look at Mrs. Shen and saw that she looked sad. Mrs. Shen stepped forward and looked at Shen Manting. She said, "Look at you. You've lost so much weight. Besides, we're your parents. Can you address us as you used to?" Shen Manting pursed her lips and remained silent. Shen Longyue sighed and walked to the baby's crib. He reached out to touch the baby's body and said, "It's good that the fever has subsided." Shen Manting looked at them and said, "Go and rest. Leave this to me. From now on, I'll be the baby's nanny." Shen Longyue was shocked. "What did you say? How can you be a nanny?" Mrs. Shen was delighted and said, "Do you mean that you'll take care of the baby and not leave?" In fact, Shen Manting hadn't thought about it yet. When he heard this, he neither nodded nor shook his head. "I'll take care of the baby." As for how long, she didn't know. Perhaps half a year, or a few months. After all, she was not a member of the Shen family. She could not take this child with her. She would not take anything else with her. Mrs. Shen's face lit up with joy. She looked at Shen Manting and said, "That's great. I'll ask Nanny He to prepare more dishes. Our family will be happy today." "Sir, madam, there's no need for that." Shen Manting looked at them and said, "Shen Luo, and asked me to be a nanny, so I'm a nanny. I'm nothing but this. The nanny's room has already been tidied up." Mrs. Shen's heart ached. She looked at Shen Manting and stomped her feet anxiously. "How can you do that? Manting, don't say things like that." Shen Longyue was the same. He frowned and shook his head. "You're not allowed to be a nanny. Since you're back, go back to your room." Chapter 2012. Give the child a home? Shen Manting smiled awkwardly and said, "Well, since you're back, look after the child. I'll go pack my things first." As she spoke, she pulled her hand out of Shen Luo's and quickly walked out. Mrs. Shen was a little stunned when she saw this. She turned to look at Shen Longyue and found that he was rebuking her. "You're too impatient." Mrs. Shen felt aggrieved. She pursed her lips and said, "Isn't that what you mean?" "That's what I want, but Manting has just come back. It's not too late to express this intention later." Shen Longyue reached out and gently patted his wife on the back. "Luo and has done too many ridiculous things in the past. I'm afraid she won't be able to accept him so soon. Let's take it slow." "Take it slow?" Mrs. Shen felt even more aggrieved. "Luo and is already so old, and they even have a child." As she spoke, she lowered her voice and said, "And now that she's living in our house, what if someone sees her and thinks she's our daughter? Wouldn't she be fooling around with Luo and?" The more she thought about this, the more anxious Mrs. Shen became. She looked at Shen Longyue and said, "Honey, I think this matter should be settled as soon as possible. I can take my time, but Luo and is your son and your mother's grandson. It doesn't matter if you're not anxious, but your mother will be." Mrs. Shen's words made sense, and Shen Longyue also thought of this problem. He frowned and said, "Since Luo and said to let her come to our house as a nanny first, he must have made arrangements. Whoever started the trouble must end it. Let's wait for Luo and to settle it himself. Mother will definitely be impatient. I'll think about it for Mother. Isn't she coming back in a few days? We'll talk about it then." Although Mrs. Shen was not very satisfied when she heard this, Shen Luo and Shen Longyue had the same temperament. Since he did this, he must have already planned it out. She hoped that she wouldn't make things worse. The couple discussed it, and Shen Manting had already begun to prepare her small room. Although the room was small, it was still a separate compartment. She put the bed sheets on, turned on the light, and entered a new living environment. During this period of time, she had been to many places. Although it was a little small, the conditions were not bad. The baby seemed to know the time. Shen Manting had just unpacked her luggage when she heard the baby crying. He quickly washed his hands and hurried over. Mrs. Shen was already coaxing the baby in her arms. When she saw Shen Manting approaching, she smiled and said, "Manting, can you help change the baby's diaper? He might have pooped." She then looked at the time and said, "It's time for the baby to take his medicine. We have to feed him some milk first." Mrs. Shen was even happier. Although Manting was unwilling to marry Luo, and she was, after all, the baby's biological mother. When taking care of the baby, she was more attentive than any other nanny. "Take it slow." Longyue was right. This kind of matter could not be rushed. After playing with the child, Nanny he finished preparing the meal. Shinjilia and his wife didn't come back for dinner, and Shinluo and couldn't leave the laboratory, so they were the only ones eating. Chapter 2013. She hurriedly finished her meal and hurried into the room. The baby had just taken the medicine and fell asleep again. Shin Manting looked at the baby's sleeping face next to the crib, and the corners of her mouth slightly raised. Shin Manting couldn't get enough of his fair and tender face. From time to time she would touch his little hands, touch his little face, and even his fetal hair was very cute. She didn't know how long she stayed by his side before sitting down. Being a mother was really a very happy thing. If it weren't for Shin Luo, and perhaps her life would be different now. But it was too late. From the moment she agreed to come back with the old lady, she was destined to be extraordinary in this life. When she looked at the baby, he had already slept for more than an hour. Normally he should wake up soon. She immediately went to boil water to make the milk powder. Just as the milk powder was ready, the baby woke up with a whimper. Shin Manting looked at it and breathed a sigh of relief. She tested the temperature, and when it was suitable, she put it aside and picked up the baby. She fed the bottle to him, and in a moment the baby stopped crying. A pair of soft and tender hands held the bottle and sucked. Looking at the baby sucking the milk in big mouthfuls, Shin Manting felt a twinge in her heart. When she just left, her breasts were swollen and painful. Every day she fantasized about the baby sucking in her arms. She fantasized about this feeling for more than half a month. Later, with the little savings she had left, she traveled while doing odd jobs, and the feeling faded a little. However, in the end, under the solicitation of the personnel department, she couldn't help but join. After that, Shin Manting's heart became more and more guilty. When the baby was full, he opened a pair of round black eyes and looked at Shin Manting. A pair of pink and tender feet looked at Shin Manting and stretched out his little fist. She didn't know what he saw, but he suddenly grinned. His pink and tender gums were exposed, and he was so cute that Shin Manting's heart melted. After playing with the baby for a while and changing the baby's diaper, Shin Manting was very sleepy. She looked at the time, and it was past 9 o'clock in the evening. Time passed unknowingly, and Shin Luo and still hadn't returned. After thinking about it, Shin Manting sat on the bed with the baby in her arms. An adult and a child stared at each other. Shin Manting felt like a fool, but she was enjoying it. All of a sudden the door opened. Shin Manting was startled by the sudden movement. She stood up abruptly. Such an action also startled the baby. He opened his mouth and looked like he was about to cry. When Shin Luo and saw Shin Manting acting as if she was about to face a formidable enemy, he felt as if a certain part of his heart had been ruthlessly stabbed. However, his expression was still gloomy as he asked, "How is the baby?" "Very good." Shin Manting tried to calm herself down. She lowered her head and said, "Very good." "Okay," Shin Luo answered and was about to close the door. However, this movement soon stopped. He glanced at Shin Manting and decided not to close the door. "I'll take a shower first," he said. "Oh." Shin Manting couldn't help but feel a little anxious as she held the baby in her arms. It was another chance to be alone, and it was in his room. It was as if he had returned to a year ago before everything had happened. "Wait." Shin Manting suddenly said, I'll take the baby to the living room first. I'll come out when you're done." Shin Luo felt a stab in his heart, and his lips suddenly tightened. Chapter 2014. The bathroom door was slammed shut with a dull thud. Shin Manting's heart skipped a beat. She walked out with the infant in her arms and sat on the sofa in the living room. Mrs. Shun was wearing pajamas and was drinking water from a glass in her hand. When she saw Shin Manting, she walked over and sat down in front of her. She glanced at the infant and chuckled. "Are you used to being home?" Shin Manting lowered her head and smiled awkwardly. "I'm fine. We're family. Manning, I really like you. Don't be so reserved at home in the future. You're a good child, and the infant doesn't want you to be too harsh on yourself." Mrs. Shun put down her cup and looked at her. "Everyone welcomes you back. Forget all the unhappiness you had in the past." "Okay," Shin Manting responded in a low voice. Then she held the infant in her arms and fell silent. Mrs. Shun looked at her dispirited expression and sighed softly. She stood up and said, "It's getting late. Go to bed early." "Good night." Mrs. Shun felt a little sad. "Good night." Shin Manting sat on the spot for a while and soon heard the sound of slippers. Shin Luo walked over and glanced at her. Then he reached out his hand. The infant was taken away. He didn't say a word from beginning to end. His hair was still wet and his face was cold. It was obvious that he was unhappy. Shen Manting wriggled her lips and wanted to say something. But the moment Shen Luo and turned around, she immediately swallowed her words. When she saw Shen Luo and closed the door, she got up and returned to her nanny's room. The nanny's room was very small, very small. Shen Manting looked at it and felt a little emotional. But soon she was defeated by sleepiness. She yawned and pulled out a set of pajamas. Then she took a shower and fell asleep. The next day Shen Manting woke up early in the morning. She hadn't learned much during this period of time, but her biological clock was very accurate. She would be sleepy before 10 p.m. and wake up at 6:30 a.m. After washing up, she went out. Nanny he was already making breakfast. When she saw Shen Manting coming out, she smiled and greeted her. Morning. Why didn't you sleep a little longer? I'm used to it. Shen Manting stepped forward to wash her hands. Let me help you. What do you need me to do? No need. Nanny he didn't need her help at all. She glared at her and said, How many people do we need for breakfast? You can go to young master's room and have a look. Shen Luoan? He hasn't woken up yet, has he? Shen Manting frowned slightly. The baby was crying just now. He's probably coaxing the baby now. Go and take a look, Nanny he instructed. See if there's anything I can help with. All right. Shen Manting wiped her hands. She soon arrived at Shen Luo An's door. After a moment of hesitation, she knocked on the door twice. After a few seconds, the person inside opened the door. Shen Manting looked refreshed, clean and energetic. And Shen Luo, and her hair was messy and she was wearing pajamas. She looked sleepy. He frowned when he saw Shen Manting, but he quickly turned around and lay back on the bed. However, he didn't say anything. He did not ask her to come in, nor did he ask her to leave. He just left the door open. Shen Manting was a little startled. She quickly walked in and took a look at the baby's crib. The baby's big, round eyes were pitch black, and its tongue was spitting out bubbles. He seemed to see Shen Manting and looked at her. Chapter 2015. Squeak! The baby clenched his little fists and waved them around. Shen Manting couldn't help but smile. Feed him. Shen Luo An, who was under the quilt, suddenly blurted out these two words. Shen Manting heard him and quickly walked out with the baby in her arms. She closed the door while she was at it. Shen Luo An buried his face in the quilt. When he heard the sound of the door closing, he subconsciously looked up. Sure enough, it was empty. The baby was gone. The room was unbelievably quiet. However, Shen Luo An couldn't fall asleep. Shen Manting fed the baby and took him to the garden for a walk. The morning sun was very gentle and the baby was exposed to it. He frowned out of habit. She widened her beautiful big black eyes and looked left and right. Manting, it's time to eat. Nanny, he shouted. Shen Manting immediately replied, Okay, wait a moment. As soon as she finished speaking, she heard a man's voice from afar. Don't let the baby get sunburned. She turned around and saw Shen Luo An in dark gray home clothes standing at the door. It was obvious that he didn't have enough sleep. Shen Manting looked at the baby in her arms and seemed to have guessed why he was so sleepy. He's in good condition. You don't have to feed him the cold medicine. The little guy has a bad temper. Remember to feed him or he will sulk alone. Shen Luo An walked forward and said in a low voice. Shen Manting heard this and thought it was a little funny. She said, The baby is still so young. How can he know so much? You can try if you don't believe me. Shen Luo An said to Shen Manting, but his eyes were looking at the baby. I didn't believe it before. Shen Manting was skeptical, but she looked down and saw that the baby seemed to be thinking of something. He smiled and showed his pink gums. Let's eat. Shen Luo An reached out and took the baby. I have to go to work later. Look after the baby. Shen Manting felt a little strange. Shen Luo An seemed to be in a good mood today. Why did he tell her so many things? However, after saying this, Shen Luo An went back with the baby. Shen Luo An seemed to be very busy. He left the house after 8 o'clock and was not seen the whole day. Shen Manting played with the baby in the room for a while and the baby fell asleep. Looking at the time, it was already 10 o'clock at night. Shen Luo An hadn't returned yet. Shen Manting was already exhausted. She sat on the edge of the bed and soon fell into a deep sleep. The next time she woke up was because of the baby. Shen Manting had already woken up before she started crying. However, the lights in the room were obviously turned off, and She was clearly leaning against the wall just now. When did she lie down? Shin Manting was slightly shocked. She turned around and saw the man sleeping beside her. Her heart skipped a beat and she stood up abruptly. The baby began to cry loudly. Shin Manting immediately stood up and carried the baby in her arms. Shin Luo, and turned over, covered his ears with a pillow and went back to sleep. Shin Manting clearly saw his actions. It was obvious that he had no intention of caring for the baby. Shin Manting was a little annoyed when she realized this. What if she wasn't here? Wouldn't he make the baby cry to death? She coaxed the baby and said softly, "Don't cry, don't cry. Mommy will make milk for you. Be good." As he spoke, he did not forget to look at Shin Luo-han. But he still had no intention of moving. Chapter 2016. Shin Luo, and was so sleepy that he still didn't want to open his eyes. Raising his hand to hold hers, he turned around and asked, "What?" "Look after the baby. I'm going to rest." Shin Manting felt angry. "If I'm not here, will you leave the baby alone? He was crying so hard just now. He's starving." Shin Luo, and opened his eyes. His sleepy eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of fog. He stared at Shin Manting and said slowly, "Aren't you here?" Shin Manting was speechless for a moment. She pulled her hand back angrily and said, "Will you leave him alone if I'm here?" "You're here." Shin Luo, and yawned and looked extremely sleepy. "I've worked all day today. I'm exhausted. Do you want the baby to lose his mother and father?" "What he said," Shin Manting said angrily, "how can you say that? Will you be exhausted just looking after the baby?" "Sooner or later." Shin Luo, and covered himself with the quilt and said in a muffled voice, "Sleep here and look after the baby. I may not be able to wake him up if he cries." Shin Luo-an. Shin Manting was angry. "I haven't taken a bath yet." "Then go take a bath and come back later to look after the baby." "No, I'm not sleeping here." "What's wrong with sleeping here? It's not like you can't sleep. Didn't you sleep well just now?" Shin Luo, and covered himself in the quilt. "The baby needs someone to look after him. Why would I ask you to come back if you don't care about anything?" Shin Manting was speechless and couldn't refute for a moment. After a long pause, she said angrily, "How can a nanny sleep in the same room as the master? You're the baby's mother." Shin Luo, and quickly turned his back. "The baby's mother should share a room with the baby. Stay here. I'm sleepy. I'm going to sleep first." Shin Manting was exasperated. She looked at his tightly wrapped back and angrily reached out to give him a hard shove. "You're being shameless." Shin Luo, and didn't say anything and just lay down and pretended to be dead. After a while, she heard the sound of even breathing. Shin Manting was so angry that she stamped her feet. She stood up and quickly walked out. However, as soon as he stepped out, the baby started to whine in the next second. She deliberately waited at the door for a while to see how Shin Luo and would react. In the end, he really fell asleep and did not move at all. The baby cried even louder, and Shin Manting was so angry that her eyes turned red. "This bastard." She stomped forward and picked the baby up. She touched his little butt out of habit, only to find that his diaper was a little sticky. After wiping the baby's butt and changing him into a clean diaper, she finally managed to coax him to sleep. She then went to take a shower. After taking a shower, he felt refreshed and more energetic. Looking at the time, it was almost 2 o'clock. She went to Shin Luo-an's room and turned off the lights. She didn't know when the baby had woken up, but he was staring at something with his eyes wide open. Shin Manting reached out and squeezed his little hand. Her heart was filled with tenderness. The baby yawned. Soon it couldn't hold on any longer, and its eyes slowly opened smaller and smaller. Seeing that the baby had finally fallen asleep, Shin Manting was extremely sleepy. She glanced at the king-sized bed. The bed was very big. At the moment, Shin Luo and was curled up on the innermost side, his body pressed against the wall. She hesitated for a moment and thought of the past few months in Jiangnan. Didn't he spend the same time like this? They slept in the same bed and he didn't do anything to her. Chapter 2017. Shin Manting lay down and closed her eyes. She was so sleepy that she fell asleep as soon as she closed her eyes. During this period, the baby woke up twice. Shin Manting fed him twice and changed his diaper once. After that, the sky was bright. Shin Luo and seemed to be sleeping soundly, but in the middle of the night, Shin Manting vaguely felt a strange touch on her body. This feeling was inexplicable, but she woke up several times to see Shen Luo and huddled in the corner. Shen Manting felt lucky, but she also felt that she was being ridiculous. Shen Luo and might not care about her. For example, she had become much uglier since she came here. Moreover, after giving birth to the baby, her belly began to grow fat. Her body was thin, but her belly was bulging, which was very ugly. The sky was bright and Shen Manting got up and stretched her back. The baby was still sleeping and his little mouth was slightly pouting. He looked especially cute. Shen Manting's lips curled into a smile as she entered the bathroom. After she was released, she went to her room to wash up. The door was closed and Shen Luo and quickly put down the quilt. He turned over and hugged the quilt in a good mood. He smiled slightly. Shen Luo and woke up after 9 o'clock in the morning. Shen Manting didn't know how long she had been holding the baby. Seeing him obviously sleeping soundly, she felt unhappy. Although he had been busy the whole day yesterday, he should have had a good rest. But his behavior of completely ignoring the baby made her very angry. After washing up and eating breakfast, Shen Luo and went to change his clothes. He said, "Change your clothes and go buy something for the baby." Shen Manting was stunned. "You don't have to work today?" "Yes, I finished my project so I can take a day off." Shen Luo and took the baby and urged, "Go quickly. It's rare that I have time today. The baby is missing a lot of things. Take this opportunity to make up for them." Missing? What is it missing? Shen Manting couldn't think of anything. It seemed that he had everything he needed. Shen Luo and didn't look at her anymore. He was holding the baby in a very good mood and he laughed. Like a big fool. Shen Manting felt a little disdainful and then went back to the room to change. The clothes were very simple. She bought them last summer. They were a little big and the pants couldn't fall. From time to time he would tug at his pants. Shen Luo and seemed to notice it. He frowned and said, "What are you wearing?" "What are you wearing?" "Go and change." "I have no clothes." Shen Manting said confidently, "I used to weigh 120 kilos but now I'm less than 50 kilos. I'm all big now. I'm not small anymore." Shen Manting was tall. She was 168 centimeters tall and had a voluptuous figure. Especially her breasts, one could tell at a glance that they were heavy. At this moment Shen Luo and looked at it. Indeed, it seemed to have shrunk. Shen Manting noticed his gaze and glared at him. "What are you looking at?" "I have a belt in the bathroom. Put it on yourself." "I don't need it." Shen Manting quickly returned to the nanny's room and changed into a long dress. Although it was a little wide, it still looked quite fitting. Nanny he watched from the side and continued to work. A smile quietly spread across her face. My goodness, he's finally enlightened. These few days of brainwashing weren't in vain. Chapter 2018. "Got it?" Shen Manting replied. She took the baby from him and stuffed the large backpack into his arms. Shen Luo and raised his eyebrows slightly and didn't care. When they arrived at the mall, Shen Manting found a stroller in the trunk of the car. She stuffed the baby and baby supplies into it and went straight to the baby's exclusive floor. Shen Manting didn't think that the baby lacked anything before, but when she arrived at the mall, she felt that everything was useful. She asked the shop assistant to carry the shopping baskets and added one after another. After a while there were 2 big baskets. When she paid the bill, it cost nearly 20,000 yuan. Shen Manting was shocked and exclaimed, "Baby things are so expensive now?" The shop assistant smiled and said, "Yes, babies are weak, so everything has to be the best." As he spoke, he looked at the baby in Shen Manting's arms and said, "Especially for such a small baby, his immunity is relatively low. If the products aren't used well, he might get sick. Our brand is very good and many celebrities like to use our products." That's right. When Shen Manting heard this, she actually felt that it made sense. But it was a little too expensive. It seemed that she didn't buy much in total. There were a few milk bottles, other baby disinfection cabinets and other miscellaneous things. There weren't many big things and they were all miscellaneous small things. Seeing Shen Luo and swiped the card, her heart ached a little. Shen Luo and glanced at her and saw her obviously distressed expression. He said, "I didn't ask you to pay for it. I bought it for my son. Why are you distressed?" Shen Manting rolled her eyes at him and then walked away with the baby in her arms. "Go back." "What's the hurry?" Shen Luo and signed and then looked at the shop assistant. "We'll pick it up later." "Okay." The shop assistant smiled brightly. "Then I'll pack it for you first. Remember to come back later." "Okay." Shen Luo and pushed the small stroller away. Shin Manting turned around and said, "Hand me the milk bottle." Shin Luo, and bent down and handed it to her after finding it. Shin Manting fed the baby as she walked and asked, "What else do you want to buy?" "To the third floor." "The third floor?" Shin Manting looked at him strangely. "That's the women's section. I'll buy you a few. Look at what you're wearing." Shin Luo, and looked as if he couldn't bear to look at her. "Those who don't know might think you're pregnant again. How are you going to answer them when they ask?" Shin Manting, "Moreover, it's obviously an old dress. I'm too embarrassed to tell others that you're my son's mother." Shin Luo, and stepped into the elevator in disgust and pressed the button for the third floor. Shin Manting was still standing at the door looking indignant. Still not coming in? Only then did Shin Manting walk in with the baby in her arms. In this shopping mall, consumption was the first line. Even though he didn't buy many baby products, he still spent so much money. Of course, the quality of women's clothing was not low either. Shin Luo, and walked into the store that Shin Manting used to like. As soon as he walked in, he saw a dress that was popular this season. "This looks good," he said. Shin Manting, who was standing behind them, guessed that the dress probably cost a few thousand yuan. She looked at Shin Luo and said weakly, "I think my clothes are pretty good. Let's go. Go and give it a try." Shin Luo, and took the baby over and held the bottle. Shin Manting was stuffed with a piece of clothing, and she felt very unconfident. Chapter 2019. The waiter quickly came up and said, "This is our new collection for this season. It just arrived and shows off your figure." As he spoke, he had already taken off the dress and said, "Try it on. It must look good on you. You have such a good figure." Shin Manting looked at the dress and felt a little tempted. The pink dress made her look thin and beautiful. One look and you could tell that it was a small size. She didn't even dare to think about it. In the past, she used to wear large sizes. She carried the dress and reluctantly entered the fitting room. She quietly looked at the tag and was shocked. Hundreds of thousands, 4,800. Shin Manting's hands were trembling. It was so expensive. If she was still working at her previous job, she would have to eat or drink for a month to wear this dress. Shin Luo, and had just paid 20,000 yuan and this dress. But it was really beautiful. After seeing the price, Shin Manting wanted to try it on. After all, it was free to try it on. Shin Manting hesitated for a moment and put it on. She put it on and zipped it up. Her hair, which had been tied up to make it easier to carry the child, became messy in an instant. She simply took it off and let her long black hair fall over her shoulders. When she opened the door and walked out, the waiter exclaimed, "Wow!" Shin Luo, and heard the noise and turned to look. His eyes lit up and stared straight at her. Shin Manting was obviously much thinner than before. But she still had the parts that should be there. Her waist was slender, her breasts were full, and her whole figure was perfect. Her hair was loose and she looked like she had returned to the old Shin Manting. The high-spirited, proud, and sweet Shin Manting. However, the Shin Manting who had calmed down made him feel even more sorry for her. Shin Manting also couldn't believe it. She looked at herself in the mirror and couldn't believe it either. But, this dress was too expensive. "I'll take this one. Try these two." Shin Luo, and brought her a few dresses including a skirt and pants. The waiter took them with a smile and said, "Okay, then I'll bring new goods from the warehouse. Please wait a moment." Shin Manting felt guilty. She walked over and gently touched his back. She pulled his sleeve and said, "That dress costs 5,000 yuan. It's too expensive. Let's go to another store." Shin Luo, and glanced at her face and said, "What are you afraid of? I didn't ask you to pay for it." As he spoke, he gave her a push. "I'll have to bring you along when I go out in the future. Are you trying to embarrass me by wearing that?" These words seemed to contain a lot of information. Shin Manting was stunned. Before she could react, Shin Luo, and nudged her and said, "Help her get changed." The waiter quickly responded and came over. "I'll do it myself." Shin Manting stood in front of her and took the clothes from her hands. However, every time he changed a set, Shin Luo, and would only say one word, "I want it." Shin Manting thought he was crazy. She gritted her teeth and asked, "Did you get rich?" "No." Shin Luo, and smiled. "But I can afford to buy a few clothes." Shin Luo, and Shin Manting stamped her foot and said anxiously, "I won't return it to you. So much money." The clothes in this shop were very expensive. She used to be reluctant to buy so much. Now that he suddenly gave her so much, Shin Manting felt her heart bleeding. Although it wasn't her money that was being spent, it was indeed a lot of money that was flowing out. Chapter 2020. Shin Manting was stunned when she heard this. She looked up and saw Shin Luo An's expression. At that moment, Shin Luo An seemed to be looking at her with an indescribable softness in his eyes. She subconsciously took a step back and then Shin Luo An said, "Go and change them. If you don't like them then don't want them." "Don't like them? How can I not like them? They're so beautiful." Shin Manting took the clothes into the fitting room, and when she came out again she looked completely different. Shin Luo An was very satisfied with his taste. He nodded and said, "I'll take them." "No, I don't like them very much so I don't want them." The attendant smiled and nodded, "Okay, I'll wrap up the previous ones for you." "Okay," Shin Luo An answered before Shin Manting could say anything. The attendant was very happy and quickly asked her colleagues to bring out the goods. After checking and packing them one by one they took out all of them. There were a total of 8 bags which cost more than 30,000 yuan. Shin Manting felt her heart twitch when she saw the number and said, "Shin Luo An, hold the baby." Shin Luo An handed the baby over. Little Moon was already asleep, and his little white and tender fists were clenched. Shin Manting felt that she had had an incredible day. She turned back and looked at Shin Luo An who was swiping his credit card, and her heart was pounding. She knew that Shin Luo An was rich. But she couldn't afford so much money. It was just a few clothes. Did he have to spend so much? He was a prodigal. Shin Luo An signed and when he left with the bags he saw Shin Manting in a daze. "Let's go." Shin Manting came back to her senses and followed him out. Shin Luo An hung the bags directly on the stroller's handle and slowly pushed the stroller back to the 7th floor. The baby products were all packed and the driver was already in place. When he saw them coming he quickly sent them to the garage. Shin Luo An and the driver put everything in place, while Shin Manting sat in the car. When they finished she had been in a daze for a long time. When he returned to the driver's seat Shin Luo An started the car steadily and glanced at Shin Manting. Shin Manting held the baby in her arms and didn't dare to speak. After a while she couldn't help but say, "These clothes are too expensive." "It doesn't matter. I'll deduct it from your salary." Shin Luo An held onto the steering wheel. "You seem to be in a good mood. What do you want to eat? Are we still going to eat? The baby has been out for a long time." "Of course we have to eat. How can we take care of the child if we don't eat?" Shin Luo An glanced at her. "Let's eat Hunan cuisine. I haven't had it in a long time." Hunan cuisine? Shin Manting gulped. She also had not eaten for a long time. He lowered his head and didn't say anything else. Shin Luo An carried the baby in his arms and put on the baby's supplies. The baby woke up as soon as he got out of the car. He opened his eyes wide and looked around. As expected, Shin Manting went to the maternity ward first. Sure enough, the baby had diarrhea. After wiping his butt and changing his diaper, she carried the baby into the dining room. Shin Luo An had already begun ordering dishes. She heard a few of them: mushu pork, crispy and tender spotted chicken, mushroom yolkless egg. Shin Manting almost drooled. She held the baby in her arms and lowered her head. She was in a great mood. Chapter 2021. Okay. Shin Manting put the baby back in the stroller and soon the dishes were served. Shin Luo An didn't eat much spicy food, but Shin Manting liked it very much. He ordered a lot of spicy dishes and they smelled so good. Shin Manting ate happily but Shin Luo An couldn't stand it anymore. He kept drinking water and inhaling air. Shin Manting glanced at him and said with a smile, "It's no use. You're already like this after eating so little." Shin Luo An didn't say anything. He picked up a piece of spicy meat with his chopsticks and stuffed it into his mouth. He drank water while stuffing it and said calmly, "It's quite delicious. It was just a little spicy." Shin Manting silently looked at his flushed face and bright red lips. She pursed her lips and didn't expose him. But she already had a mocking smile on her face. Shin Luo An saw it, and his expression became even calmer. He silently moved his chopsticks to other dishes that weren't spicy. Shin Manting laughed while eating. Even she herself didn't realize how wonderful her mood was at this moment. After the meal, the two of them took the children home. It was already past 1 o'clock in the afternoon when they arrived home. This was the time when the desire for a nap was strongest. Shin Manting felt sleepy after changing the baby's diaper and feeding him milk. After coaxing the baby to sleep, she came back to her senses and found Shen Luo, and doing something in the room. Shen Manting knocked on the door twice, and after a while she opened the door and walked in. Shen Luo, and sat on the edge of the bed with a notebook on his knees. His fingers were typing quickly. "Where's work?" Shen Manting quietly walked in and put the baby in the small crib. Shen Luo, and glanced at her and said, "I'm going out for a while. Look after the baby." "About work?" "Yes, a new drug has been developed recently, and Lao Wu has an appointment for dinner." "Oh," Shen Manting replied. She felt a little strange. Lao Wu was his partner, but most of the drug development was handled by Shen Luo and himself, and Lao Wu was responsible for marketing and communication. Why did Shen Luo and have to do it himself now? Shen Luo and seemed to see through her doubts and explained, "I'm the main person in charge and only I know a lot of the principles." "But didn't you just finish eating?" "The dinner is at night. I have to go back to the lab now." He turned off the computer and placed it at the foot of the bed. He stood up and said, "Take care of the child. I'll probably be back later." "Oh, let's go." Shen Manting felt a little uncomfortable and muttered, "Why are you telling me?" It was as if he was telling her something. What was there to explain? She didn't have a good relationship with him. The corners of Shen Luoan's lips curled up slightly, and he quickly walked to the cloakroom. He picked out a suit and changed into it with a swagger. He didn't seem to mind Shen Manting's presence. Shen Manting turned around awkwardly and put away the baby's milk bottle with her back to him. She held 3 to 5 milk bottles in one hand and was about to leave the room when she happened to catch a glimpse of Shen Luo, and taking off his shirt. Shen Luoan's skin was very fair, and he looked gentle and delicate. Her cheeks flushed and she opened the door and went to the kitchen. After washing all the milk bottles, Shen Luo and came out in a formal suit. He glanced at her and said, "I'm leaving." Shen Manting didn't say anything, but her heart inexplicably pounded. Looking in the direction of his departure, she muttered, "Just leave. It's none of my business." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.